Hey guys, welcome back to the Red Bed. Today I've got over 3 hours of real life Reddit stories for you to chill with, whether you're falling asleep, relaxing, or just want something playing in the background. And while you listen, I'll be sharing some chill, hardcore gameplay I got today where I spend most of the time building my base. Also, I'm trying to post these videos daily, so if you're enjoying them, consider dropping a sub. But anyways, kick back, relax, and enjoy. This first story is about two broke college kids who just wanted to enjoy a budget night out, but instead got caught up in the most awkward mix-up with management. Back in 2010, my friend and I were just a couple of broke college kids trying to feel fancy for one evening. She was 20, I was 19, and when you don't have much money, Olive Garden feels like high-class dining. Endless breadsticks, maybe a pasta bowl, and you're living the dream. We decided to splurge, treat ourselves, and for a night pretend we were eating somewhere truly special. We sat down, placed our orders, and decided to get a little playful with the drinks menu. Not with alcohol, we weren't old enough for that. We ordered virgin mudslides. For anyone who hasn't had one, it's basically a glorified milkshake. Chocolate syrup, ice cream, whipped cream, maybe some fancy glassware to make you feel like it's something more. It was the kind of thing you could justify as a treat because, hey, we were out for a nice dinner. The evening was going perfectly fine until the manager himself came strolling up to our table. He had that big customer service smile plastered across his face and a bottle of wine in hand. It was clear what he was doing. This was his upsell moment. He was going to pour us a little taste, get us interested, and suddenly our fancy dinner would come with a pricey bottle of wine we couldn't afford. But before he could launch into his pitch, I stopped him. "No thanks," I said, polite but firm. "We're underage." That smile slid right off his face like butter on hot breadsticks. He stopped mid-motion, narrowed his eyes, and pointed directly at the glasses on our table. "But you already ordered alcohol." We blinked at him, confused. "No, these are virgin mudslides," we explained. "They don't have any alcohol in them. It's just ice cream and chocolate." He didn't buy it. In fact, he doubled down. He said we were lying, that he knew what we had ordered, and that if we were trying to sneak alcohol underage, he'd have to throw us out. I was floored. We hadn't done anything wrong. We hadn't even tried. We specifically asked for the non-alcoholic version. Our server knew it. We knew it. But this manager refused to believe us. Then came the part that still makes me laugh all these years later. With this smug little expression, he reached across the table, grabbed my glass, and said something along the lines of, "Well, let's see then." He was so sure he was about to bust us for underage drinking, you could practically see the victory forming in his head. And then he took a sip. I swear, the second that cold, chocolatey milkshake hit his tongue, his whole face transformed. His eyes went wide, and you could literally see the horror dawning on him. The realization hit him all at once. We weren't lying. It wasn't alcohol. It wasn't even close. It was just an overpriced glass of chocolate syrup, milk, and ice cream. And he had just taken a swig of a teenager's drink to prove a point that wasn't even there. He turned the color of a ripe tomato. The smugness evaporated and was replaced by frantic backpedaling. He started apologizing so fast it was like he was trying to break a world record. "I am so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. That was completely inappropriate. Let me make it right." He couldn't get the words out fast enough. And then, in an effort to save face, he comped our entire meal on the spot. Pasta, breadsticks, mudslides, everything suddenly became free. He even ordered me a freshly made replacement drink, like that somehow erased the fact that he had just taste tested mine like a weirdo. My friend and I sat there in stunned silence for a moment, then just started laughing. We came in expecting to spend our carefully saved $20 on pasta and milkshakes, and instead we got a front row seat to the most awkward moment of that manager's career, plus a free dinner to top it off. So yeah, that's the story of how two broke kids got a free meal at Olive Garden. All it took was a manager accusing us of underage drinking, stealing my glass, and then realizing too late that he'd just made himself look like an idiot. Delicious revenge in the form of breadsticks and a comp check. That's where the story ends. That's hilarious. The image of a manager dramatically grabbing your drink to catch you, only to realize he just stole a teenager's milkshake, is priceless. Honestly, you couldn't script it better. And the best part is, the punishment fit the crime. He embarrassed himself, then had to pay the price by covering your whole meal. Definitely the tastiest free dinner you could ask for. This next story is about sibling revenge taken to a ridiculous level. All it took was one bag of crap, a little patience, and two gullible brothers who ended up at each other's throats for years. Back in the late 1980s, I was just another kid in a house full of siblings, always scheming ways to get one over on my brothers. I had two of them in particular, Keith and Jared. Keith was the clean freak, the type of guy who couldn't handle a sock out of place. Jared was the opposite. He loved fish tanks. I'm talking 4 or 5 of them crammed into one bedroom. Bubbling filters, fish food flakes everywhere, and that permanent faint aquarium funk that never fully goes away, no matter how many air fresheners you buy. These two were like oil and water, and that made them perfect targets for my revenge. See, the whole thing started because I'd stayed out all night with a friend. My parents were generally lenient. They let us stretch curfews as long as we checked in, and they knew where we were. But an all-nighter? That was pushing it. I thought I'd gotten away with it too. Nobody seemed the wiser. But then, the very next night at family dinner, both Keith and Jared broke the unspoken kid code. They ratted me out to mom and dad in front of everyone. I got grounded, and they got the satisfaction of watching me suffer. At that moment, I swore revenge. But I wasn't going to lash out immediately. That's amateur hour. I wanted something subtle, something that would drive them crazy and keep them fighting each other long after I was in the clear. So, I waited. I bided my time for about a month, letting the whole incident fade into the background. Once I was off my parents' radar, I started laying the groundwork. The setup was simple. Exploit Keith's obsession with cleanliness and Jared's stinky aquarium room. I started making little comments to Keith like, "Man, Jared's room really smells bad." Or, "Do you think one of his fish died in there?" After a few days of these casual remarks, Keith picked up the baton and started confronting Jared himself. "Seriously, dude, clean your room. It stinks in here." Jared just laughed him off, waving a hand through the air like it was nothing. But I knew I had him. The seed was planted. Keith got more and more annoyed. Jared ignored him harder, and the tension simmered between them. That's when I struck. One morning, while everyone was out, I did the unthinkable. I grabbed a brown paper lunch bag, squatted over it, and, well, contributed the contents. A fresh, steaming pile of revenge. I sealed it up, tiptoed into Jared's room, and shoved it deep into his closet. The smell wasn't immediate, but it was strong enough that after a day or two, it started seeping out. Right on cue, Jared noticed. He sniffed around, lifted up some clothes, checked behind his fish tanks, convinced maybe one of his fish had gone belly up somewhere. And then he found it, the infamous bag of crap. His eyes must have nearly popped out of his head. In Jared's mind, there was only one possible culprit. Keith. Who else had been harping on him nonstop about his room smelling bad? Obviously, neat freak Keith had planted the evidence to prove a point. So Jared marched straight into Keith's room and hid the bag there. The cycle had begun. Keith came home later, caught a whiff, searched his room, and pulled out the bag. Oh, that bastard Jared, he must have thought. Without hesitation, he marched it right back into Jared's room and hid it again. This went on for days. The bag would bounce back and forth like some twisted, smelly game of hot potato. Neither of them ever stopped to think, maybe the third brother was behind it all. They just kept escalating. The fights grew louder each morning, the accusations sharper. And me? I just sat back, laughing silently to myself as my plan played out perfectly. At one point, Keith decided to up the ante. Instead of just hiding the bag, he stapled it to the back of one of Jared's drawers. Jared tore his room apart trying to find it, but the bag was hidden too well. He became obsessed. He left his windows wide open day and night. In Florida summer heat, mind you, just to try to air the smell out. He even started sleeping in the living room, convinced the stench was driving him insane. And the whole time, Keith was smirking, Jared was raging, and I was silently basking in the glory of my perfect revenge. Then came the ultimate payoff. One morning, Keith and Jared were at each other's throats again over the bag. They were yelling so loud they didn't hear my mom come home unexpectedly. She'd forgotten a lesson plan for her classroom and came in through the front door right into the chaos. "What is going on here?" she shouted, storming into the hallway. Both Keith and Jared exploded at once, voices overlapping. "He put the bag of crap in my room." "No, he started it. It's his fault." My mom froze. Then, in a moment that will forever be burned into my memory, she yelled. And she never cursed. Not ever. Are you telling me you two hid a bag of in my house? Do you know how many times I have gone looking for that smell? I was in my room, listening, barely able to keep from rolling on the floor with laughter. My mom was livid, my brothers were grounded for weeks, and as the cherry on top, they had to clean the entire house from top to bottom. Me? I was in the clear, untouchable. They had no idea it had all been me, and I never told them. Not then, not for years. The truth finally came out much later, in the mid-90s. My parents had divorced, but we all met up for Christmas and ended up grabbing lunch at a pizza place. We were reminiscing about old times, telling stories, when my mom suddenly brought it up. I still can't believe you boys had a bag of poo in the house, she said, shaking her head. Keith pointed at Jared. That was him, Jared shot back. No way. That was all you. I just smirked, silently enjoying the memory. Only one person knew the real story. My ex-wife, Clarice. I had told her years earlier in confidence, and right there in the pizza place, she burst out laughing. Full-on, uncontrollable laughter. My dad looked at her, then at me, and then back at her. Slowly, realization dawned on his face. Oh, you bastard, he muttered at me. At that point, Keith and Jared both turned on me, pummeled me right there in the booth, while Clarice laughed so hard she could barely breathe. And honestly, totally worth it. That's where the story wraps up. This one's sibling mischief at its finest. It's the kind of prank that required patience, strategy, and just enough evil genius to make it last. The best part wasn't even the fights. It was how long the lie held. Years of blame shifting, years of arguments, and they still didn't figure it out until it slipped through someone else. This next story is about someone who bought a brand new refrigerator, only to find the delivery guy nickel and diming them at every step, until the tables turned in the funniest way. Not too long ago, I bought myself a brand new refrigerator. It was part of a bigger kitchen renovation project, and I was excited. You know that feeling when you finally get to upgrade and everything matches? Stainless steel appliances, fresh cabinets, the whole deal. This fridge was the last piece of the puzzle. When I purchased it, I made it crystal clear. I needed the new fridge delivered and the old fridge hauled away. The store said no problem, added an extra fee to the bill, and I walked away thinking everything was set. Easy. But the day before delivery, I called to confirm, and that's when the first red flag popped up. Suddenly, I was told that removal of the old fridge wasn't included. Apparently, the driver might take it, but only if I gave him $20 cash. $20 isn't the end of the world, but being told last minute? That annoyed me. Still, I figured fine. It's worth it just to have the old thing gone. Delivery day came, and that's when things really started spiraling. The guy showed up with my brand new fridge, sized me up, and immediately hit me with, "Your doorway isn't wide enough. We'll have to take the door off the hinges. That'll be $40 cash." Great. Another fee. I sighed, but what choice did I have? I needed the fridge inside the house, not sitting in the driveway. So I agreed, but it didn't stop there. As he maneuvered around, he suddenly discovered that both the old fridge and the new fridge's doors needed to be removed and then reattached to make everything fit. Surprise. Surprise. That would be another $20 cash. At this point, I was aggravated, but it felt like I was stuck, over a barrel. I wanted my new fridge in place, so I gritted my teeth and let him do it. While he was working, he started making conversation. He asked if the old fridge was broken. I told him no, it still ran fine. Then he asked why I was replacing it. I explained I'd just redone my kitchen and wanted stainless steel to match everything. He nodded, but the way he kept pressing about the old fridge started raising little alarms in my head. It was like he was more interested in that fridge than the brand new one he was installing. Eventually, the whole ordeal was finished. The new fridge was in, the old one was out, and the driver left. I chalked it up as one of those annoying experiences where you just pay more than you expected and move on. But then, the next day, I got a phone call. It was the delivery guy, and he wasn't calling to check on the new fridge. No, he was calling because he'd taken the old fridge, and only then realized it was missing the crisper drawers and all the door shelves. He wanted to know where they were, and that's when it all clicked. He didn't haul away that fridge like a service. He wanted it for himself. That's why he kept asking all those questions. That's why he suddenly cared so much about it running fine. Lucky for me, I'd been suspicious too. While he was outside doing the delivery, I had quickly yanked out every drawer and every door shelf from the old fridge. I stashed them all in a back bedroom. He never noticed. He happily loaded up the fridge, completely unaware it was gutted inside. So when he called, all aggravated, demanding the drawers and shelves, I had to bite back a laugh. I told him if he really wanted them, it was going to cost him $40 for the drawers and $20 for the shelves. Cash only, of course. I let that hang in the air for a second before adding, "Just kidding, I'm keeping them. I've already repurposed them for cabinet storage and under the sink organizers. But hey, enjoy the fridge." And that was that. He wanted a free fridge for himself, but instead he got an empty shell. Meanwhile, I walked away with a brand new stainless steel beauty in my kitchen and a bunch of free plastic bins that are surprisingly handy for organizing. Honestly, it felt like poetic justice. That's where the story ends. That cracked me up. The way the delivery guy just kept tacking on cash fees like he was running a side hustle, and then got outplayed at his own game. That's gold. I love that the shelves and drawers turned into storage bins too, like the perfect petty bonus. Honestly, it's hard not to laugh picturing him opening the fridge later and realizing it's completely hollow inside. This next story is about one of those impulsive moments that snowballs into absolute chaos. It all started when someone jokingly put their boyfriend's cat's paw in their mouth and accidentally taught the cat a whole new love language. So my boyfriend has this cat named Magoo. She's not just any cat. She's the kind of feline who walks into a room like she owns the place, tail straight up like a little flag, eyes scanning for her next victim. Magoo is tiny, scrappy, and has the energy of someone who's had 5 shots of espresso and a vendetta against gravity. She knocks things off shelves for fun, launches sneak attacks on unsuspecting ankles, and has this smug little face that just screams, "I dare you to stop me." Despite being a total menace, Magoo is also incredibly affectionate, but always on her own terms. She'll flop across your laptop when you're on a Zoom call, smack you in the face with her tail while you're eating cereal, or curl up on your chest just when you're about to get up and do something important. She's a lovable chaos goblin. And for some reason, she likes me. Earlier today, Magoo was perched next to me on the couch, stretching out her paw in that casual, imperious way cats do, like a queen granting her subject permission to bask in her presence. Without thinking, without even one single rational brain cell firing, I did the dumbest thing. I picked up her little paw and pretended to nom on it. No biting, no licking, nothing actually gross. Just an intrusive thought that won the battle against common sense. Now let me pause here and acknowledge. I know this is disgusting. This cat walks in a litter box. She probably stepped in things I don't even want to imagine. But at that moment, it was just this goofy impulse. Like, haha, funny cat foot in mouth, silly human. I figured she'd yank it away immediately and glare at me like I had personally insulted her ancestors. And at first she did exactly that. She whipped her paw back, gave me the most offended look I've ever seen on a cat, and licked her toes like she was trying to scrub away the memory of my existence. I laughed, embarrassed but relieved. Okay, dumb joke over. Lesson learned. Won't do that again. Except, I underestimated Magoo. Not even 5 seconds later, she slowly extended her other paw toward me. But this time, she wasn't casual. She looked focused, intentional, like she was saying, "Wait a second, human, run that back." I should have stopped right there. I should have ignored her, gotten up, walked away, done literally anything else. But no, my smooth-brained self thought, "Oh my god, she wants me to do it again, that's hilarious." So I opened my mouth. Big mistake. Huge. Magoo, with the speed and precision of a professional fighter, shoved her entire fuzzy paw straight down my throat. Not a cute little poke, not a gentle tap. No, this was a full-on toe bean ambush. I gagged so hard I almost choked. My eyes watered. Magoo sat there, smug as a cat can be, like she had just unlocked a new form of human-cat communication. And that's when it hit me. She doesn't know why I did it. She doesn't think it was a joke. She thinks I was showing her love. She thinks this is our thing now. Ever since that cursed moment, she has been relentless. Every time I lie down on the couch, she climbs up and starts maneuvering her little paws toward my face. When I yawn, she's there, eyes gleaming, paw ready. If I laugh too wide, she sees her opening. It's like living with a tiny, furry dentist who specializes in unwanted gag reflexes. Last night, I woke up in the middle of the night to find her perched on my chest, paw hovering millimeters from my mouth, like she was plotting the perfect strike. I swear she was waiting for me to snore just so she could slip a foot in there. I've created a monster. And here's the curse part. My boyfriend has no idea. He wasn't home when this started. He hasn't seen Magoo's new ritual in action. He just thinks she's being her usual clingy, weird self. Meanwhile, I'm living in fear that at any moment, she's going to test this new bonding behavior on him too. I can already picture it. He's sitting on the couch, watching TV, yawns innocently, and boom, fuzzy little paw jams straight into his throat. He's gagging, she's purring, and I'm sitting in the corner trying not to laugh because I know exactly why she's doing it. Part of me knows I should warn him. I should take responsibility for my actions. Explain that I accidentally taught his cat that shoving her feet in people's mouths is an act of love. But another, much louder part of me kind of wants to see it happen. Because the look on Magoo's face when she shoved her paw into my mouth, that smug little gotcha expression, I need someone else to experience that chaos too. Misery loves company. And in this case, the misery is feline-induced gagging. So yeah, that's my life now. I live with a cat who thinks we're bonded for life through some bizarre paw-and-mouth ritual. All because I had one dumb, intrusive thought and acted on it. And I'm not even mad. That's where the story ends. The mental image of a cat proudly shoving her foot into someone's open mouth like it's the ultimate sign of love. That's comedy gold. What kills me is how quickly cats pick up on things and then just run with it. Like, she saw one weird action and immediately decided, yep, that's our forever thing now. Honestly, I almost kind of hope the boyfriend does get the toe bean treatment just so they don't have to carry that cursed moment alone. This next story is about a customer who thought a store asking for ID meant they didn't trust anyone, and then learned the hard way why rules exist. I work at a small retail store that doubles as an authorized package drop-off spot when delivery drivers can't or won't leave parcels at someone's front door. It's one of those jobs where you wear 3 hats at once: cashier, stock clerk, and part-time detective for cardboard mysteries. Because we hand people other people's stuff, there's one golden rule we don't mess with. You present a physical, government-issued photo ID before we release a package. No exceptions. That rule exists because once you give a stranger a box, you can't get it back without police paperwork and a whole lot of headache. Most customers understand that. Some customers, however, do not. Yesterday was one of those days where the universe decided to serve me comedy. An older woman walked in, eyes skimming the giant sign that explicitly says, "Please present ID for pickup." I was behind the counter cataloging a shipment that had been water damaged in a freak sprinkler malfunction. My side of the store looked like a soggy paper graveyard. When she asked if she could leave her ID in her car and just give me her name and address to get the package, I told her, politely but firmly, that we needed the ID. She shrugged and left. Not a dramatic exit, just a leisurely, confident, "I'll be back." An hour later, she returned. Same nonchalance, like she'd popped down to get milk, and the question of identity verification was an affront to her dignity. "Give me my package," she said. "I don't see why you wouldn't give me it earlier. Who else is going to have my name and address?" She genuinely seemed baffled and annoyed, which is probably why I'm still giggling about it. I took her ID, as the rule required, and went to look for the box. I like to be conversational with customers in small doses, so I explained, "It's the rule. We want to make sure we're handing your parcel to the right person." I started checking the barcode against the system and confirming the shipping name. Standard, boring, necessary. She snapped back, "Are you saying you don't trust your customers?" With that theatrical incredulity people use when they think the rest of the planet is morally bankrupt. I was carrying the package back when she asked, so I kept walking and said calmly, "I've never met you. I don't know what you look like. We've had problems here before where people tried to pick up packages that weren't theirs. We'd rather be safe than sorry." I handed her the ID back while scanning the package out. And then, this one is gold. She snatched the ID from my hand and declared, "Well, that's just stupid and poor customer service. Now give me my package." Like grabbing someone's ID like a prize would somehow undo the company's liability concerns. I hit the last buttons on my register, turned to the signature pad and said, "All right, last step. Please sign and hit OK with the pen." She hesitated like the concept of a signature was a newfangled idea invented to oppress the elderly. Unbelievable. What are you going to do if I refuse to sign? She asked, genuinely testing me. I kept my voice level and said, if you don't sign, I won't release the package. That's the rule. No signature, no release. The customer huffed, scribbled her name like she was signing a confession, and threw the pen back like it had personally offended her. I made direct eye contact, pressed the OK button for the system, and said, all right, all done. The package is all yours. She snatched the box out of my hands and stomped out, belt of indignation trailing behind. 10 minutes later, my boss wandered up from the back, where they were arguing with the landlord over whether the landlord would cover the water damage bill. They looked at me and asked, incredulous, did she actually ask if we didn't trust our customers? I laughed, because what else can you do when someone is this spectacularly oblivious? Yep, I said. Then my boss, who is the kind of person who can't help but be a little theatrical, shook their head and asked, how do you get to be an adult and still think like that? I shrugged and said what I always say in these moments. Dunno, but she's probably also convinced any day now a Nigerian prince is going to make her rich. We both cracked up. Later, when the rush died down, a coworker checked the CCTV feed to confirm the whole interaction. And there it was, frame by frame, the grand performance. The customer's face was a portrait in entitlement, and I swear she threw the pen with the kind of anger usually reserved for people who stubbed their toes on perfectly level curbs. What I loved most wasn't that she thought we were accusing the world of being untrustworthy. It was that she seemed to think the rules were a personal insult aimed at her. The ID and signature aren't about distrust in the abstract. They're about the logistics of accountability. We're not saying people are criminals. We're saying mistakes happen and paperwork helps fix them without everyone crying to the police, the internet, and their cousin's Facebook feed. So did she get her package? Yes. Did she enjoy having to sign for it? No. Did she learn anything? Probably not. But she gave the staff a story, and the rest of us a reminder that rules exist for a reason, especially when you're handing strangers other people's shipments. And if nothing else, she reminded my boss and me that some people still think the world owes them a shortcut. That's the end of this story. Some people see rules as personal attacks, but in reality, they're the guardrails that keep chaos in check. Watching someone argue with a sign feels almost comical, especially when the rule in question exists to protect everyone involved. What makes it even more ironic is how entitlement often turns the simplest transaction into a full-blown performance. At the end of the day, the rules don't just protect packages, they reveal who understands accountability and who thinks the world owes them a shortcut. And honestly, those dramatic reactions often become the stories coworkers laugh about long after the shift is over. This next story is about a grad student whose friend turned toxic, accused her of leading a guy on, humiliated her in public, and then ended up dealing with karma in the messiest way possible. I'm in the final stretch of my PhD, living in a foreign country, and honestly, life is stressful enough with the job market looming over my head. The one thing that's kept me grounded is my friend group here. We're kind of a mixed bag. Some of us are still in grad school, some graduated and are working, some are prepping to apply. Over the past 2.5 years, we've gotten really close. One of my closer friends was Anna. She's about 30, finished her degree last year, and now works in industry. For a long time, we hung out even outside of the group. But over time, I noticed a side of her that rubbed me the wrong way. Controlling, dismissive, a little rude. I kept brushing it off, telling myself that friendships don't need to be perfect, and I liked having different kinds of personalities in my circle. Around the time she graduated, Anna started dating Ben, another member of our group who was in his early 20s, and that's when things shifted, not just with her relationship, but with how she treated me. For context, I've never been in a relationship. Dating is a very private, very sensitive topic for me, and I don't really like discussing it. But Anna became obsessed with my love life, or rather, the lack of it. She'd pressure me constantly, making comments about how I should put myself out there. She even tried to push me toward Chris, another guy in the group, like she was auditioning me for some weird matchmaking role. I always had to politely explain why I wasn't dating, which got exhausting. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening with Dan. Dan and I had always had this love-hate thing going on. He was a little arrogant, a little aloof, and half the time we had to drag him to group events. But out of nowhere, he started showing up more, making an effort and actually being attentive. It felt different. We even ended up in the same city for work one weekend. We hung out, had a great time, and when snow shut down the roads, he ended up crashing in my hotel room. Nothing physical happened, but that weekend changed something between us. He was warmer after that, more playful, more thoughtful. We had inside jokes, and the group noticed. Of course, Anna pounced on it. She latched onto the idea of me and Dan as a couple and pushed me hard to date him. I told her more than once, I wasn't in a place to date. I wasn't staying in this country forever. And Dan wasn't either. He had obligations back home. It wasn't realistic, but she wouldn't let it go. Then one night, after a group outing, I wasn't feeling well. Dan offered to give me a ride. In the parking lot, he confessed his feelings. It was sweet and genuine. I told him how much I valued him, but also why I couldn't start a relationship right now. He respected that. We agreed to stay friends, and he has been nothing but respectful of my boundaries since. But Anna? She lost her mind. She accused me of breadcrumbing Dan, called it disgusting, and told me I was stringing him along. She said I didn't know what men wanted and that if I kept it up, I'd end up alone. It wasn't just annoying, it was cruel. Things finally boiled over the night I hosted the group at my apartment. We were planning a regular get-together, but it happened to be Dan's birthday. The others asked if we could surprise him with a cake, and I said sure. About an hour before the party, Anna lashed out at me. She accused me of trying to impress Dan, of seeking attention, of making the night about me. Then she went further. She threw racist comments at me. I'm South Asian, Dan is white, and the things she said were ugly. She told me I didn't deserve love, that I would die single. I almost canceled the entire night right there. I didn't, but the evening was ruined for me. Later that night, I fainted from the stress. When I came to, 3 friends, including Dan, were still there, taking care of me. They were furious with Anna and wanted to confront her, but I begged them not to. I didn't want more drama. Then came the wedding last week. The group was invited, and we were all having a good time. A teenage relative of the bride mistook me and Dan for a couple and asked us to dance. We laughed it off, clarified we weren't together, and moved on. But Anna decided to make it ugly. In front of everyone, she loudly announced that we were friends with benefits. The whole room went silent. I felt my face burn. I didn't even argue. I just walked out. A few friends followed me, but the damage was done. And here's where karma stepped in. Later that same night, after I left, Anna caught her boyfriend Ben making out with someone at the after party. Huge blow-up, screaming match, total drama. They broke up on the spot. And then, as if that weren't enough, Anna went to Dan's place looking for comfort. And Dan, bless him, turned her away. He told her to leave and refused to let her in. Now from what I hear, most of the group is distancing themselves from her. She's staying with her sister, and her reputation in the group is basically shredded. Meanwhile, I'm not doing anything. I didn't plan revenge, I didn't orchestrate anything. I just tried to keep my peace, and everything seemed to collapse around her on its own. I've been trying to understand it. Maybe she was miserable in her own relationship and took it out on me. Maybe she's insecure and couldn't handle that I wasn't making men the center of my life. Maybe she secretly liked Dan, and that's why she was so aggressive. Or maybe she's just a plain old jerk. My friends leaned toward the last option. Either way, I'm done. I'm hurt, I'm confused, and I'm still processing everything. But I'm not going to chase this friendship anymore. Sometimes karma really does its own work. That story wraps up here. That's brutal. The insults, the humiliation, the constant pressure. That wasn't friendship at all. Honestly, the fact that she ended up getting hit with her own drama right after trying to humiliate you feels like instant karma. Sometimes you don't have to lift a finger. People reveal who they are, and it catches up to them. I think walking away from the whole thing is the smartest move. No friendship is worth that kind of chaos. This next story is about a woman at the gym who thought she was just helping a guy out with a move, only to realize he was secretly filming her, and she decided to make him pay in the most humiliating way possible. I've been into calisthenics and weightlifting for years, and because of that, people at the gym often ask me to show them certain moves. To be honest, I don't really like it. I'm not a personal trainer, and I worry about teaching someone wrong or being held responsible if they hurt themselves. But at the same time, I never want to discourage newcomers from working out. So, even though it makes me uncomfortable sometimes, I'll usually say yes. Most of the guys who ask me are respectful, genuinely curious, and interested in learning. But there's always that 30%, the ones who ask for help but really just want me to do the move in front of them so they can watch, then claim they'll try it next session. I always assumed it was nerves, like maybe they didn't want to fail in front of me. That was my generous interpretation, until recently when the truth slapped me in the face. I was halfway through a hip thrust set when this guy came up and asked me to demonstrate a one-handed elbow lever. I told him I was in the middle of my set and didn't know if I had time. He said he'd wait, so there I was, pushing through my reps, while this man sat uncomfortably close. So close I had to tell him to back up because my barbell was practically between his legs. He pulled over a step to sit on and just stared while I finished. When I wrapped up, I figured, fine, let's just get this over with. He clearly wasn't going anywhere. I asked if he could already do it with two hands, and he said yes. So I got down and started showing him the basics of transitioning to one. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something. His phone was up. He was recording. At first I thought maybe I was overreacting. Then I looked straight at the screen. It was zoomed in. On my butt. When I called him out, he tried to gaslight me. He said I had given him permission because I agreed to show him the move. I told him flat out that agreeing to demonstrate is not the same as agreeing to be filmed. I demanded he delete it. He pulled up the video, and sure enough, there it was. Me bent over with the camera aimed exactly where I thought it was. A trainer overheard and started to walk over, but I waved him off, saying it was fine. Because in that moment, I decided I didn't just want the video gone. I wanted payback. I wanted this skinny little videographer to squirm. I wanted him to feel as uncomfortable as he had just made me. So I told him it was his turn. Right here. Right now. No excuses. No, I'll do it tomorrow. No, I'm tired. I've had a long workout. He was going to get on the ground in front of everyone and try the exact move he pressured me into demonstrating. And he was going to do it with half the treadmills watching. Of course, he tried to wriggle out of it. He stammered something about having to leave soon. I didn't budge. I stood over him and told him the same way he pressured me. I was going to pressure him. He had watched me struggle through hip thrusts, had sat so close I could feel his presence, and then had the nerve to film me like some creep. Now he was going to fail. Publicly. And fail he did. He couldn't even lift his feet off the floor with two hands. His arms shook, his face went red, and everyone around got to witness him crumble under the weight of his own arrogance. I didn't need to scream. Didn't need to make a scene. The silence of the treadmills slowing down as people glanced over was enough. I didn't get money, but I got something better. Payment in the form of sweat, tears, and pure embarrassment. That's where the story ends. That's honestly brilliant. The guy thought he was being slick, and instead he got forced into the spotlight and exposed for how weak he actually was. No shouting, no fighting, just poetic justice. And the fact that it happened right there in front of everyone at the gym, that's priceless. This next story is about a woman whose sister demanded part of her inheritance to fund a dream wedding, and now she's being pressured by her family to give it up. My dad passed away last year after a long illness. Losing him was devastating, but honestly, what really sticks with me are the years leading up to it. Those were harder in a lot of ways than the funeral itself. Watching someone you love slowly decline, losing pieces of themselves bit by bit, that takes a toll. When things got bad, I was the one who moved back home. I'm 28 now, but back then I packed up my life and came back because I knew Dad needed me. I handled everything: doctor's appointments, bills, pharmacy runs, and the endless emergencies in the middle of the night when something went wrong. I cooked, I cleaned, I kept the house running when he couldn't anymore. It was exhausting, emotionally and physically, but I don't regret a single second of it. If anything, it gave me a chance to become closer to him than I'd ever been before. My sister, though, had a very different role in all of this. She's 32 and lives out of state. During the last year of Dad's life, she came home exactly twice. Once for Christmas, once for his birthday. That was it. I don't think she's a bad person, and I know she has her own life, but she very deliberately distanced herself from the responsibility. Her line was always, "I can't just drop everything." At the time, I told myself I understood. But if I'm being honest, yeah, it hurt. When Dad finally passed, he left a will. And in that will, he made it clear that he recognized the sacrifices I had made. He left me a decent chunk of money. Not some huge lottery-winning fortune, but enough to wipe out my student loans and give me a head start on saving for a house. It was life-changing for me, and I knew why he did it. Because he saw what I had given up to take care of him. My sister wasn't left with nothing. She got jewelry, and she got the classic car Dad had restored, the one she'd loved since we were kids. But the majority of the liquid assets, the actual money, went to me. It was Dad's decision, written out in black and white. For a while, everything was fine. I kept my head down, started paying off debt, and finally felt like I could breathe. Then my sister got engaged in May. Her fiancé seems like a decent enough guy, but together they've got champagne tastes on a beer budget. The wedding they're planning is massive. Destination resort, designer dress, open bar, hundreds of guests. It's the kind of wedding you see on Instagram reels, not the kind most people can realistically afford. I figured they were just willing to go into debt for it, which is their choice. Not the one I'd make, but still their choice. Then, about a month ago, my sister sat me down. She didn't dance around it. She said she needed my help. She told me Dad would have wanted me to use part of my inheritance to make her wedding special. And by help, she didn't mean a few $100s or even a couple thousand. She wanted $30,000. 30,000. She said that would cover the venue and catering. Like, it was nothing. Like, it wasn't almost the exact amount I just earmarked to pay off my loans and finally stop drowning every month. I told her no. I told her Dad left me that money for a reason, and I was using it to build stability in my life, not blow it on a single day. She didn't take that well. She got defensive, accused me of being selfish, and told me I was choosing money over family. And of course, my mom got pulled into it. Mom told me Dad would have wanted me to share. She said family comes first, and keeping the peace is more important than finances. I pointed out that Dad literally wrote a will, his last statement of intent. If he wanted to pay for a wedding, he could have done that. He didn't. He chose to give me that money instead. But Mom just kept repeating that I was tearing the family apart. Now my sister has taken it a step further. She's been telling relatives that I'm punishing her for not being around when Dad was sick. And the worst part is, it's kind of true. I do feel resentment. I can't pretend otherwise. I was the one there every single day, shouldering the hard parts, and now she wants me to hand over the reward for it like it's nothing. It feels so unfair. Our extended family is split. Some cousins are on her side, sending me messages like, "It's just money, you'll make more," and "Your dad would have wanted her to have her special day." Others thankfully have my back and say it's insane that she even asked. The pressure keeps building. My sister has told me flat out that unless I do the right thing, I won't be invited to the wedding. My mom is begging me to reconsider for the sake of peace, and I'm sitting here racked with guilt, but also completely unwilling to hand over 30 grand just so my sister can have a flashy wedding that she and her fiance can't afford on their own. Because at the end of the day, that money isn't just money to me. It's security. It's the recognition of everything I gave up to take care of Dad. It's my chance to finally start building a future without debt hanging over me. Handing it over would mean pushing all of that back, just to make my sister's Instagram wedding happen. And I can't do it. I won't do it. But the guilt is still eating me alive because everyone keeps telling me I'm the one tearing the family apart. That's the end of this story. That's rough. It feels like the will made Dad's wishes crystal clear, and yet people are still trying to rewrite the script because it benefits them. 30,000 isn't pocket change. It's life-changing money for the narrator, and blowing it on a party would be brutal. Honestly, it says a lot that the sister is willing to uninvite her own sibling over this. To me, that makes the wedding look more about status than family. I think most people listening would probably say the same thing. You don't owe anyone your inheritance. This next story is about a guy who spent years driving his girlfriend everywhere and even gave her his old car, but now he's wondering if he's wrong for finally stepping back. I'm 25, my girlfriend's 25, and we've been together since January of 2022. In the beginning, everything was pretty balanced. She had her own car, 2 jobs, and we could meet up on our own terms. Things felt easy and normal. But about a year into the relationship, things started changing. Her car got repossessed. She dropped down to one job. From that point on, I became the one picking her up most of the time. If I wasn't available, she'd rely on her mom or an Uber, but most days it was me. On top of that, I was already covering most of our expenses. Entertainment, food, even travel. I was the one paying. I didn't mind helping, but I also made a point of telling her she needed to start saving money and rebuilding her credit. I've got solid credit myself, so I even laid out the steps for her. I sent her helpful videos, explained what to do, even reworked her resume so she could find better opportunities. I wasn't just being her chauffeur, I was actively trying to help her get back on her feet. There was a stretch where we started looking at cars together. We'd send each other links and even checked out a dealership once, but somehow it never moved past the looking stage. Fast forward to the summer of 2024. I bought myself a new car to replace my secondary one. At first she drove it a little bit, but then my primary car got totaled. So I had to make that new car my main ride, which meant I was right back to juggling one car and still driving her around. Then, in November of that same year, I bought another car to be my new main ride. That finally gave me some breathing room, so I told her she could use the old one. All she had to do was cover gas. I paid for the insurance, the taxes, the maintenance, everything else. It felt like a win-win at the time. She had a car again, and I wasn't stuck playing taxi every single day. By the summer of 2025, though, I was starting to feel stretched. I told her I needed her to pitch in $150 a month. I said it was to help cover insurance. But honestly, I was just putting it aside for her. It was my way of making her practice responsibility and save toward her own car. Then in August, it happened. She got into an accident with my old car. Thankfully, she wasn't at fault and she fully recovered within a few days. But once things settled, I asked the obvious question. How much had she managed to save? Her answer? Almost $1,000. And that broke something in me. After all this time, after me giving her the tools, the advice, the car, the rides, she had less than $1,000 to show for it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, I asked how the car search was going. She shrugged it off and said she hadn't found anything yet. Eventually, the conversation turned into this long back and forth. That's when she told me straight up, if she doesn't ask me for rides, then don't pick her up. She said she doesn't want to inconvenience me anymore. She admitted she's still scared to drive after the accident, but she's looking, and a car will be coming soon. And just like that, it's been a week. I haven't picked her up once. She's been taking Lyft after work, figuring it out on her own. And honestly, I feel torn. On one hand, I finally feel some relief, like I'm not carrying her anymore. On the other hand, I feel low-key guilty, like maybe I've abandoned her when she still needed me. So here I am, asking myself, after years of picking her up, covering most of our expenses, and even giving her my old car, am I really the a-hole for finally stepping back and letting her handle her own transportation? That's the end of this story. It's a tricky balance when generosity turns into responsibility that one person carries almost entirely. In this case, years of driving, covering expenses, and even providing a car show just how much effort went into keeping things afloat. The fact that so little progress was made despite all that support makes the situation even heavier. Sometimes stepping back isn't about giving up. It's about allowing someone else the space to finally stand on their own. That shift may feel uncomfortable, but it often ends up being the very push needed for real change. This next story is about an event planner who grew increasingly frustrated with a mysterious, difficult guest on the catering list, only to realize the guest in question was actually themselves, and then decided to lean all the way into the joke. I run recurring meetings that feel like miniature marathons, 3 days, 50 people, and 7 catered meals that I somehow have to make not only edible, but also not lethal for anyone with a food allergy or a religion I barely remember from a single HR form. Event coordination is a slow-release anxiety pill. Spreadsheets, vendor emails, delivery windows, the sad gamble of, will the chicken be dry or will it be a blessing? And I've learned that the only thing more stressful than feeding a crowd is trying to feed a crowd when one person checked the box for weird. This time the registration export arrived, and I dutifully scrolled through dietary notes the way an archaeologist scrolls through a relic's inscriptions, hoping for clarity, prepared for nonsense. Most entries were the usual: no shellfish, peanut allergy, kosher if possible. Then I hit the one that made my eyes narrow and my shoulders tense. No meat, no sugar. Single person, lone flag on the grid. The kind of specification that turns a perfectly rational catering plan into a quest for unicorn entree options and sugar-free desserts that don't taste like compressed cardboard. I sighed audibly in my empty office and started mentally drafting passive-aggressive coping strategies. If you've spent time in Eventland, you know the imagination goes dark and petty in a fun way. I pictured a little gold star on a badge. Special meal. Hand deliver. I wrote myself a dramatic grocery list in my head. Artisanal, sugar-free mousse, vegan protein something or other, and a daily courier run to pick up fresh special order entrees, because the caterer's vegetarian lasagna apparently comes with a side of regret. I pictured the smug satisfaction of personally handing over the plate with a flourish. For you, our most exacting guest. It was deliciously petty and wholly unjustified, because usually when the form reads, no meat, no sugar, it's someone with an actual medical reason, or a devout fasting practice, or a deliberate lifestyle choice. Still, I stewed. Because I'm the kind of person who will plan for worst-case scenarios, I started emailing caterers, asking awkward questions about cross-contamination and sugar substitutes, piling on extra costs for myself like a martyr who wears a vest of vegan guilt. I budgeted time to pick up a special dessert that nobody else would touch. I pictured myself traipsing through 3 grocery stores at dawn like a dietary detective and felt the righteous indignation bubble up. Why must the event planner go the extra mile because one person is picky? The inner monologue became extra theatrical. I would play host, but I would make the special meal a production, a very small, slightly passive-aggressive opera. Then, after a solid week of low-level planning anger and one too many spreadsheet filters, I scrolled sideways in the sheet to see who this no meat, no sugar person actually was. Document metadata, registration ID, email address, name column. My brain was ready to clap slowly and start the show. And there it was, staring back at me in cold, unadorned font. My name. My contact info. The person I'd been plotting to publicly martyr with a gold star badge was me. Diabetic vegetarian, checkbox checked, dietary notes filled in because my life occasionally requires sugar-free options, and my body occasionally requires no meat at all. For a beat, I experienced the exact physical sensation of a prankster who has tripped over their own trap. The petty theater in my head imploded. The righteous indignation evaporated, replaced by a ridiculous kind of self-awareness. I had spent a week mentally crafting a revenge spectacle for a person I know intimately, I myself. I had imagined the arrogance of a stranger and responded to it by committing to extra labor for no good reason, only to learn I was the stranger. It was simultaneously mortifying and deeply funny. At that point, I had 2 choices: confess the whole melodrama to my co-organizers and die of embarrassment, or lean into it and give myself exactly the petty treatment I'd planned. I chose the latter, because if you're going to be the subject of your own passive-aggressive fantasy, you may as well make it entertaining. I ordered the special sugar-free vegan dessert, arranged the personal handoff, and, yes, I printed a gold star and stuck it on my badge with exaggerated ceremony. I set the badge in plain view on the registration table like a tiny badge of honor and humiliation combined. When the meeting started and the other attendees filtered in, I got to act out the role I'd written for myself. I handed my own special plate to my own self with a deadpan theatricality of someone who fully understands the cosmic joke. Special meal delivery, I announced to no one and everyone, and made a point of ceremoniously turning the plate toward my own place at the lunch table. People laughed because the situation was absurd, and I laughed because that absurdity was mine. The gold star became a private joke I shared with the room in asides and eyebrow raises. Yes, I was the vegetarian. Yes, I was diabetic. And yes, I had absolutely been plotting to make the special meal a ceremony for an imaginary picky stranger. Unplanned benefits emerged. Vendors appreciated that I'd investigated the dietary logistics. I actually avoided a cross-contamination snafu. Attendees noticed the attention to detail, and I got to deflate my own temperate little scheme by turning it into a joke. The special meal was tasty, sugar-free, and kind to my glucose levels, and the gold star earned a modest amount of office lore. I found myself telling the story later, at drinks, and watching colleagues snort laugh as the petty arc resolved into humility and a self-applied pie in the face. That's the end of this story. There's a special kind of comedy in plotting petty revenge only to discover the intended target is oneself. The moment flips irritation into absurdity, turning a week's worth of imagined theatrics into a humbling punchline. It shows how easily assumptions can spiral when small details, like checking a name column, are overlooked. And in the end, what could have been an embarrassing mistake instead became a shared laugh, proof that even self-directed pettiness can be transformed into office lore. This next story is about someone who worked hard on their health journey and ended up getting one of the most meaningful compliments they'd ever received from the last person they expected. For the past 15 months, I've been laser focused on my health. It hasn't been easy. I've lost about 90 pounds, and I've done it the old-fashioned way. Exercising, lifting weights, fasting, cutting out fast food, and paying attention to what I eat. It sounds simple on paper, but for me, it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done. See, I've always struggled with binge eating. Fast food was my biggest weakness. I had all my regular spots, the places where I'd show up so often that the workers practically knew my order by heart. It was embarrassing, honestly. Some days I'd walk up to the counter and I could feel them thinking, here he is again, ordering way more than anyone should. That's what made quitting fast food such a huge part of my journey. One of my go-to places was this burger joint called Nations. I went there a lot, too much, and there was this one employee who always seemed to be working whenever I came in. She wasn't the chatty type, always quiet, always focused, almost antisocial. For years, our only interaction was me ordering, her calling out my number, me grabbing the bag, and muttering a quick, thanks. That was it. Fast forward to just yesterday. I'd had a rough day, my eating hadn't been great, my discipline slipped, and I finally said, you know what? Tonight's gonna be a cheat day. And where did I end up? Right back at Nations, ordering the same greasy comfort food I cut out of my life for more than a year. I walked in, ordered my food, and sure enough, she was behind the counter like always. Same routine, same quiet presence. Nothing felt different until I picked up my order. She handed me the bag, looked right at me, and out of nowhere said, "You lost a lot of weight, didn't you?" I froze for a second. This was a woman who had never said more than a handful of words to me in years, and now she was noticing me? I smiled and said, "Yes, I did. 90 pounds. And that's when she said the compliment that hit me harder than anything I'd heard throughout my entire journey. She said, "I can tell. Every time I'd see you lately, I thought, he looks good." It was so simple, but it floored me. She didn't have to say that. She didn't have to notice, but she did. I laughed, pointed to the bag of food in my hand, and said, "You know what helped? Not eating this." She cracked a tiny smile and said, "Well, every now and then is okay." And that was it. The whole exchange lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it left me grinning like an idiot all the way home. It stuck with me because it made me wonder something I'd never thought about before. These fast food employees, the people behind the counter, they see it all. They see the people who come in too often, who order way too much, who clearly have an unhealthy relationship with food. I always wondered if they noticed, and now I know they do. This woman had seen me at my heaviest. She had seen me at my lowest, walking in for the umpteenth time to order way more than I needed. And then she saw me gradually change. She saw me shrink down, bit by bit, until one day she decided she just had to say something. That quiet girl who never said much paid me the most thoughtful, meaningful compliment I've ever received. And the best part? It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like a throwaway comment. It felt real. It felt like she had been noticing the whole time, silently rooting for me from the other side of the counter, and finally decided I deserved to hear it. It put the biggest smile on my face. Honestly, I've had friends and family give me compliments, and those are always nice. But hearing it from someone who had watched me from a distance, someone who didn't have to say anything at all, somehow meant even more. It was validation from the most unexpected place, and it's probably my favorite compliment I've ever had. That's the end of the story. There's something powerful about how the quietest observers often end up noticing the most. A simple, genuine compliment from someone who had no obligation to say anything can carry more weight than all the familiar praise from friends or family. In this case, it wasn't just about appearance. It was recognition of hard work, consistency, and change witnessed over time. That kind of validation, especially when it comes from an unexpected place, can leave a lasting impact far beyond the words themselves. This next story is about a dad who accidentally cut someone off in a Target parking lot, but instead of fighting back when they confronted him, he went with the loudest, weirdest solution possible. Everyone who knows me knows I'm a jokester. My family, my friends, even casual acquaintances will tell you I don't embarrass easily. If something awkward happens, I'll usually just lean into it and make it funny. But I'm also not a clown 24/7. When I need to be serious, I can flip that switch. There's a time and place for everything, right? Well, today was not one of those times. Today, my brain decided to throw seriousness out the window and go full stranger danger in the middle of a Target parking lot. It started like any other errand. I had just picked up my daughter and 3 of her friends after their softball game. They were still riding that post-game energy, laughing and talking in the back seat, while I was just focused on getting to Target and knocking out a quick shopping trip. But here's where I admit it. I cut across the parking lot instead of staying in the designated driving lanes. Don't tell me you've never done it. Everyone does it at least once in their life, even though we all know it's technically not the right way to drive through a lot. Of course, the one time I did it, there was another car cutting across too, and we ended up meeting at the same spot. I was seconds away from pulling into a space when the other car came out of nowhere. I slammed on the brakes so hard that the tires screeched, and the girls in the car all screamed at once. It was one of those moments where your heart lurches up into your throat. Thankfully, we didn't actually collide, but the other driver was furious. He leaned out his window, flipping me off and shouting, pointing his finger like he was ready to chew me out in front of everyone. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. I waved my hand in the universal "sorry, my bad" gesture and figured that would be the end of it. We'd go our separate ways and life would move on. But life had other plans. After I parked and we started walking toward the entrance, I noticed the same car pulling up again. This time, both the driver and his passenger, a woman, got out and started walking toward us. You could tell by the way they were moving that they wanted a confrontation. My daughter and her friends got quiet, watching to see what I'd do. My brain clicked into some kind of protective dad mode, but instead of calmly diffusing the situation, it short-circuited. Without even thinking, I froze in place, pointed at the 2 strangers, and let out the loudest scream I could muster. Not words, not insults, just a long, guttural, drawn-out "ah" at the top of my lungs. It startled everyone around us, including the girls, who immediately joined in. Picture it, me, a grown man, pointing at 2 random people in a parking lot, while 4 teenage girls are standing behind me, also pointing and screaming bloody murder. None of us were saying a word, just screaming like alarms that wouldn't shut off. The effect was instant. The couple, who had clearly been ready to argue, completely froze. You could see the confusion spread across their faces as they tried to figure out what in the world was happening. They went from angry to bewildered in about 2 seconds flat. Meanwhile, people coming in and out of the store had stopped to stare. Some of them started laughing, others just stood there with their mouths open, probably wondering if they had just walked into the middle of some bizarre social experiment. But the girls and I didn't let up. We just kept going. "Ah!" pointing like we were stuck on repeat. It was the kind of absurdity that you can't argue with. What comeback do you even have when an entire group is screaming in unison and refusing to speak actual words? Eventually, the couple gave up. They spun around, bolted back to their car, and sped off so fast their tires squealed across the lot. They didn't even glance back. As soon as their car disappeared, the 5 of us burst out laughing. My daughter was doubled over, tears streaming down her face, while her friends were gasping for breath between cackles. Even strangers nearby were laughing, shaking their heads, like they had just witnessed the most ridiculous scene of the week. And honestly, they probably had. I couldn't stop laughing either. One second, it had been this tense moment where 2 angry adults wanted to pick a fight, and the next, it had turned into a cartoon-level meltdown that sent them running. After we pulled ourselves together, I gathered the girls around me and marched us into Target like nothing happened. We did our shopping, joking and giggling the entire time about what had just gone down. When we finally came back outside, everything was calm again. The lot was quiet, the couple was long gone, and it felt almost surreal, like maybe we had imagined it. But the laughter echoing in my daughter's voice told me it had definitely been real. We got back into the car, still chuckling, and drove off. And I couldn't help but smile, because I knew my daughter and her friends now had a story to tell for the rest of their lives. It wouldn't just be another boring errand at Target. It would be that one time my dad screamed at strangers in a parking lot until they ran away. And honestly, that's a memory I'm happy to give them. That's the end of this story. That one's hilarious. You can just picture the couple psyching themselves up for a big confrontation, only to get completely thrown off by a screaming wall of chaos. Honestly, it's genius. There's no comeback, no way to escalate. Because how do you argue with people who refuse to talk and just yell instead? And the fact that the kids joined in makes it even better. That's the kind of dad moment that goes down in family history, told and retold every time someone mentions Target. This next story is about a man who feels like his wife's family has turned him into the free chauffeur, tour guide, and caterer for relatives he barely knows, and now he's wondering if he's wrong for finally refusing. My wife and I have been married for 30 years, and in that time we've hosted a lot of family. Her side of the family in particular is very close-knit, and her mother and sisters live nearby. They've always had a way of pushing my wife into things she doesn't necessarily want to do, and now that I'm retired, I've apparently become the designated family chauffeur, host, and sometimes the wallet. Here's where this started. Recently, my wife's cousin, someone I've never even met, contacted her saying she wanted to come visit family in the area. My wife hadn't seen her in decades, but her mom and sisters were excited. Of course, since I was the one at home and retired, I got volunteered to pick her up from the airport. I didn't even know what she looked like, so I was told to hold a sign like some kind of chauffeur. Fine, no problem. I drove down, met her, and on the way home, she said she was starving. She asked if we could stop for food. We went into a restaurant, ordered, ate, and when the bill came, I paid. She didn't even make a move toward her wallet. I thought, okay, maybe she'll chip in later, not a big deal. But that set the tone for the entire visit. For the next 4 days, every single meal was on me. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, I paid. Even at a family picnic where everyone was chipping in money, she didn't contribute a dime. She stayed in my house for 4 nights, didn't lift a finger, never offered to help with expenses, and not once did I even get a thank you. On top of that, I was her driver the entire time. Airport runs, errands, little sightseeing trips she wanted to do. I drove her everywhere. It felt less like hosting family and more like being an unpaid Uber driver with unlimited free catering. By the time she left, I was frustrated, but I figured at least it was over. Except it wasn't. A few days later, my wife got an email from that cousin's sister. Apparently, word had gotten around about how much fun her sister had. Now she, along with 2 other sisters and their mother, wanted to come for a surprise visit for my mother-in-law. That's 4 more people. 4 more total strangers to me, who basically invited themselves to stay in my house. That's when I lost it. I said, no fing way. If they want to come, they can stay in a hotel. I made it clear. If they were close family, maybe I'd feel differently. But I have never met these people. My wife hasn't seen them since childhood, other than a reunion 20 years ago. And to make matters worse, a cousin we are close to straight up told us that branch of the family is notorious for being mooches. I told my wife that she could tell her relatives I was the bad guy. She could even tell them I was insisting they get a rental car and stay in a hotel. I don't care. What I care about is not spending another week catering to people I don't know, spending money on them, and chauffeuring them around town while they sit back and enjoy their expense-free vacation. Of course, my wife feels caught in the middle. Her sisters live together in a tiny condo, so they can't host. And their opinion is that since we have a house, it should be us. They said they pitch in for groceries this time, but to me, this isn't just about food. It's about the principle of it. 4 strangers have invited themselves to stay in my home without so much as asking, and everyone else expects me to roll over and let it happen. So here's my solution. I told my wife that when they arrive, I'm taking the dog and going camping. I'm not sticking around to play butler to 4 people I've never met. If her sisters want to enjoy their company so badly, they can be the ones to entertain them. I'll be out in the woods, minding my own business, enjoying some peace and quiet. The fallout has been exactly what I expected. Now I'm officially the a-hole in my wife's family. Her sisters always get their way, and because I finally drew a line, I'm the villain. But you know what? I feel justified. The next time someone says, "Oh, we don't want to put you out," I'll laugh in their face. Because yes, you are literally putting me out when you invite yourself into my home for a week and expect me to be your host, chauffeur, and personal chef without offering anything in return. So here's the question. Am I really the a-hole for refusing to cater to 4 strangers who decided my house was their free vacation spot? Or am I justified in saying no and putting my foot down, even if that makes me the bad guy in my wife's family? That's the end of this story. This situation highlights the importance of boundaries, especially when hospitality starts crossing into exploitation. There's a difference between welcoming relatives and being treated like unpaid staff, and once expectations shift toward the latter, resentment is inevitable. What makes it more striking is how quickly word spread, turning one freeloading visit into an attempted repeat performance with even more guests. Setting limits, even if it earns disapproval from extended family, is sometimes the only way to protect peace, finances, and fairness. The choice to step back, even through something symbolic like going camping, underscores the message clearly. Generosity has limits, and respect should be mutual. This next story is about a mom who set boundaries with her ex's mother after she kept showing up unannounced, and even brought the police into it when she didn't get her way. This happened a couple of years ago, but it came up recently when I was swapping crazy mother-in-law stories with a friend. She told me I was the one in the wrong, but I still don't see it that way. So for context, I have sole custody of my kids. My ex and his family live about 9 hours away, so visits don't happen often. Out of the blue one morning, around 9 a.m., I was woken up by knocking. Not at my door, at my bedroom window. I peeked through the blinds and saw a pair of sneakers. I lifted the blinds a little higher, and that's when I made eye contact with my ex's mom. My first thought was, what the hell? Nobody had called, nobody had texted. She lived hours away, and yet there she was, standing outside my window like something out of a horror movie. The apartment complex I lived in wasn't gated, so anyone could drive in, but to actually get inside the building, you needed a key. She couldn't knock on my door, so she just went for the next best thing, pounding on my window until I looked out. The only reason she even had my address was because months earlier, she asked to mail some things for the kids. At the time, I didn't think much of it, so I gave it to her. Lesson learned. Anyway, since she had already seen me, I got dressed and went out to see what she wanted. She told me she had been in the neighborhood. Keep in mind, she lives 9 hours away. I asked why she didn't call me before deciding to drive all the way there, and she brushed it off, saying it was a last-minute decision. I ended up letting her in, and she spent some time with the kids. I didn't make a big deal out of it in the moment, but before she left, I made sure to set a boundary. I told her that if she ever planned to come visit again, she needed to give me at least a week's notice. Not 10 minutes, not the night before. A full week. She nodded and left. I thought that would be the end of it. But about 4 months later, it happened again. Same thing. I heard the tapping on my window. I didn't even bother looking this time. I knew who it was. My phone started ringing. She called 5 times before I finally picked up. She told me to open the door because she wanted to see the kids. I asked why she hadn't told me she was coming. Once again, she said it was a last-minute decision. This time, though, I wasn't giving in. I told her I wasn't even home. I said I was 45 minutes away visiting my dad with the kids. Total lie, but I wasn't going to reward her behavior. She demanded my dad's address so she could come there. I flat out refused. I told her I didn't know when we'd be back, and that was the end of the conversation. I hung up. That's when the texts started rolling in from my ex. He demanded I let his mom see the kids, saying it was unfair after she drove all that way. I told him the same thing I told her. I wasn't home, and I wasn't going to rush back just because she decided to show up without warning. And then, things escalated. A few minutes later, there was loud banging on my door. I didn't answer. Then my phone rang again, this time from a random number. It was a police officer. He said he was at my apartment to perform a wellness check because, according to my ex's mom, she hadn't heard from me in 3 days and was extremely worried. I told him she was lying. I had just spoken to her on the phone minutes earlier. She knew exactly where I was. I explained that she had shown up unannounced, and I had already made it clear to her not to do that. I told him I wasn't home, and I wasn't going to drop everything just because she decided to pop by. I also made it clear that being my ex's mom didn't give her special rights in my life. The officer tried to tell me it was illegal not to answer the door when the police knock. I pushed back, explaining the situation again. Eventually, he left, but the whole ordeal left me shaking with anger. Not only had she disrespected my boundaries, but she dragged the police into it with a bogus welfare check just to try to force her way into my home. Of course, my ex immediately texted me after, calling me an asshole and demanding to know how hard it would have been to just let his mom see the kids. I want to make one thing clear. I don't mind her visiting. I don't mind her being part of the kids' lives. But I cannot stand the way she does it. Showing up unannounced, tapping on my windows, demanding access like I'm some kind of gatekeeper trying to keep her out. To me, it wasn't about keeping her from the kids. It was about control. She was on some weird power trip, testing how much she could push me around, and I refused to let her win that game. That's where the story ends. The surprise visits were invasive on their own, but escalating to a false welfare check pushed things into dangerous territory. Ignoring clear boundaries not once but twice shows a deliberate disregard for respect, and involving the police turned it into manipulation rather than concern. The fact that the ex defended that behavior instead of condemning it only highlights where the deeper problem lies. This next story is about a tenant who's losing sleep because her disabled neighbor and his caregivers keep making noise late at night, and she's torn between sympathy and filing a complaint. When my husband and I found our current apartment, it felt too good to be true. Spacious, great location right in the city center, and somehow within our budget. We moved in about a year ago, and for the most part, it's been perfect. The only complication has been our upstairs neighbor. He's around our age, somewhere in his 30s, and he uses an electric wheelchair. From what I can tell, he's not cognitively impaired. He works in IT for a well-known company and seems perfectly independent in that sense, but physically, he needs daily help. He has caregivers who come in to help him get dressed, help him get into bed, and sometimes stay overnight. At first, I thought nothing of it. I even sympathized. I have experience with family members who have special needs, so I know how much effort goes into providing that care. I assumed it would be manageable, maybe some occasional noises here and there, but the reality has been a lot harder to live with. Almost every night, and I mean at least 5 nights a week, the noise upstairs is relentless. We're talking loud conversations, laughter, dragging furniture, dropping things on the floor, and it doesn't happen in the early evening. No, it always starts between 11:30 and midnight, and sometimes goes until 2 in the morning. I wake up early for work and need to be focused, so it's become unbearable. One particularly rough night, when I had a big day ahead of me, I actually went upstairs to knock on the door. No one answered. The next day, I tried again during the daytime, and this time I spoke directly with him. I explained the situation as kindly as I could. I told him I understood the needs of someone with special care, but suggested that maybe his caregivers could prepare the room earlier in the evening and keep the noise down after 10:30. He listened. He said he'd keep it in mind, but he also told me something that stuck with me. He said neighbors had been aggressive with him before, and that he has the right to live, too. To have fun, to laugh, to enjoy himself. I told him I completely understood, and that I wanted him to have his fun, just hopefully with a little more consideration for those of us who live around him. He nodded, and for about 2 weeks, things really did improve. The noises dropped to a tolerable level, but then it all went right back to how it was before. Loud laughter, furniture scraping, thuds against the floor, all at midnight or later. Out of sheer frustration, I've even resorted to banging on the ceiling with a broom a couple of times. That would quiet them down for maybe a few minutes, but then the next night, it would all start again. Now I'm stuck in this miserable limbo. On one hand, I feel genuine sympathy for him. He's already deprived of so many things in life: mobility, independence, and laughter with his caregivers is one of the few outlets he has. Who am I to take that away? But on the other hand, I'm not sleeping. I'm dragging myself through work, exhausted, and it feels unfair that my well-being has to suffer every single night because of him. The option I have is to report him to the real estate agency. If I do that, they'll send him a formal notice, enough complaints, and he could actually be forced to leave. My rent would even be reduced if they decided it was a breach of contract. But honestly, the money isn't the point. I just want to sleep. I want a quiet home again, like I had before. And yet, the guilt sits heavy on me. I keep asking myself, Would I be the a-hole if I finally reported him? Or is this just a matter of basic respect between neighbors? That's the end of this story. Balancing compassion with personal well-being can be complicated. Joy and late-night laughter matter, but constant disruption crosses into unfairness for neighbors who need rest. Disability doesn't remove the expectation of mutual respect, and repeated disturbances after reasonable conversations show where boundaries are being pushed. When compromise no longer works, a formal complaint may be the only path to restore peace. This next story is about a mom who was suddenly expected to take responsibility for her ex's daughter, the child he had through an affair, when the school tried to hand both kids over to her at pickup. My ex and I share an 8-year-old son together. Things between us ended badly years ago. He cheated on me while I was pregnant, and because of that affair, he now has a daughter who is the same age as our boy. He went on to marry the other woman, and ever since then, we've had a tense, bare minimum co-parenting relationship. I've never had a bond with his daughter, never spoken more than a passing word to her, and I've never spent any real time with her. She isn't my responsibility. My only priority in this is my son. We do a 50-50 custody split, and usually it's fairly straightforward. But 2 weeks ago, I got a call from my son's school during one of his dad's custody days. The school said nobody had shown up to pick him up and asked if I could come get him. Of course, I dropped what I was doing and went over. When I arrived, my son was waiting there with one of his teachers. Standing next to him was his half-sister. The teacher explained that both kids had been left behind, and then she told me something that floored me. Apparently, I was listed as an approved pickup for both my son and my ex's daughter. She asked me to take them both. I told her no. I was polite, but firm. I made it clear that I never agreed to be responsible for that child, that I didn't want to be listed as an emergency contact for her, and that under no circumstances would I be the one to pick her up. The teacher said she'd pass the word along to get my name removed, but I still had to call later to follow up and make sure it was done. Neither my ex nor his wife ever told me they had added me to the pickup list for his daughter. They just assumed I'd take on that role without asking me. When my ex found out, he went ballistic. He messaged me through our parenting app demanding to know how I could leave her behind when I was already taking our son. He insisted it wouldn't have been a big deal, and that as a fellow parent, I should have just done it. I told him that I will always drop everything to pick up our son, but his daughter is not my child, and not my responsibility. I will not be their backup plan. Later, he tried to guilt trip me by saying his daughter had to wait at the school until 7 o'clock because I refused to take her. He blamed me for her being stuck there, instead of owning the fact that both he and his wife failed to plan for their child. It's not ideal, of course. She's just a kid, and I understand it wasn't fun for her. But again, she's not my child. That's on them. Now, I don't feel guilty. Not really. I did exactly what I've always said I'd do. I showed up for my son. But I keep turning it over in my mind, wondering if people would think I crossed a line by refusing just that once to bring the other girl along. I know if I had, it would have set the expectation that this was okay and become a regular thing, and I won't allow that. My boundaries exist for a reason. That's the end of this story. Honestly, I get where she's coming from. The ex and his wife tried to sneakily make her a backup parent for their kid without asking, and that's not okay. If she'd picked the daughter up even once, it would have opened the door for them to dump that responsibility on her again and again. Yeah, it's sad the little girl had to wait, but the blame lies with the adults who are actually her parents. You can't just rewrite someone else's boundaries because it's convenient. This next story is about someone whose aunt gave them $40,000 in cash because she believed the rapture was coming, and now they're wondering if they'd be the jerk for keeping it once the world keeps spinning. I grew up in a loosely Christian family, but I stopped identifying with the religion when I was still a kid. I'm queer, agnostic, and generally comfortable with who I am. Most of my family has been loving and supportive about that, except for my aunt. She's been heavily religious for as long as I can remember, and while the rest of the family treats church as something casual, she went all in. She's the kind of person who doesn't just believe in Christianity, but in the more extreme factions, including the idea that the rapture is going to happen on a specific day. For years, she tormented me at family gatherings. I'd be cornered in the living room or at the dining table while she hurled slurs, lectured me about my sins, and told me I was going to hell. My parents always intervened. always told her to cut it out, but she didn't stop until my mom finally put her foot down and banned her from seeing me if she couldn't behave. During one of those fights, my aunt told my parents they were bad Christians for not sending me to conversion therapy and that they'd regret it once the rapture came. After that, things toned down to awkward stares at Christmas dinner and the occasional unsolicited Bible verse text. Annoying, but manageable. Fast forward to recently. I'm 19 now, in college, trying to figure out life. Out of nowhere, my aunt reached out and invited me to lunch. I assumed maybe she wanted to apologize, maybe soften after years of hostility. Instead, I got a long sermon. She told me she pitied me, that she was devastated I never repented, and that soon, when the rapture came, I'd be left behind while she floated off to heaven. At the end of this tirade, she pulled out a fat stack of $100 bills, over $40,000. She shoved it into my hands, saying she wanted to give away her savings before she ascended to the Lord and wouldn't be needing money anymore. I tried to hand it back, but she refused. She insisted I take it, then got up and walked away. When I counted it at home, I almost fell over. It wasn't pocket change. It was enough to pay off a big chunk of school, secure housing, and give me breathing room for the first time in my life. And yet, my brain immediately started spinning. When the rapture didn't happen, was I supposed to hand it all back? Or was it mine to keep because she gave it freely? No strings attached. My parents had different reactions when I told them. My mom said the ethical thing to do would be to return the money, that clearly my aunt wasn't in her right mind, and I should be compassionate. My dad, on the other hand, said that if she was foolish enough to give away her life savings on a whim, the money was better off going towards something worthwhile, like my education. I'm caught between them. Part of me feels guilty. She's family, and she's clearly experiencing some kind of religious mania. But another part of me remembers all the years of torment, the slurs, the bullying, the way she made me feel unsafe in my own skin. There's a selfish piece of me that sees this as cosmic reparations, her years of cruelty turning into an unexpected chance to pay for my future. To cover myself, I even sent her an email thanking her for the gift, noting that I didn't originally want to accept it, but that she insisted. I wanted a paper trail, just in case she tried to accuse me of stealing later. I've been told to invest it instead of spending it outright, to hold on to it carefully. For now, I'm just waiting for Tuesday or Wednesday to pass, the supposed dates of the rapture, before deciding what to do. That's the end of the story. That's a wild situation. On one hand, it's hard to take money from someone who clearly isn't thinking straight. On the other, she shoved 40 grand into your hands of her own free will. And it's not like she's ever treated you with kindness before this. I can see why your dad thinks it's better in your pocket than wasted, especially if it changes the trajectory of your education. Honestly, whatever happens on Thursday when the world doesn't end, I don't think anyone could blame you for keeping it. This next story is about a guy who was supposed to stand by his best friend on his wedding day, but a drunken dare at the bachelor party led to a kiss that left him uninvited, and now he's stuck looking like the bad guy. My best friend and I have been close since we were kids. He's one of those lifelong friends where you can look back and see all the milestones together. Sleepovers, graduations, breakups, and now marriage. When he asked me to be a groomsman, of course I said yes. His fiancée has been in the picture since high school, back when they were long distance and figuring things out. I've known her for years too, and I genuinely thought I'd be celebrating their big day right beside them. Everything went sideways at his bachelor party. We started off at my place, just hanging out, drinking, and catching up. Later, we moved on to bar hopping, and that's when things got rowdy. By the end of the night, my best friend was clearly drunk, and some of the guys, our mutual friends, and even some of his cousins, started daring him to do the whole last kiss before marriage thing. You know, that so-called tradition where the groom is supposed to kiss someone one last time before tying the knot. I've always hated that tradition. It feels disrespectful. Like you're saying marriage is a prison sentence and you're sneaking in one last act of freedom. Plus, it makes the partner look like an afterthought. I always assumed my best friend hated it too, since we'd talked about how dumb it was in the past. But when the moment came and everyone was egging him on, he turned toward me. Before I knew what was happening, he grabbed me, dipped me like we were in some kind of romantic comedy, and kissed me. Not a quick peck, not a joke, a full-on, several seconds long kiss, with the whole group laughing and hollering around us. I froze. I didn't kiss him back. I just stood there until he let go, then tried to laugh it off to keep the night moving. But inside, I was stunned. After that, the fun was gone for me. I stuck around long enough to help a few of our drunk friends get home safely. Then I bailed. The next day, I woke up to a string of messages. Not from him, but from his fiancée. First on Instagram, then on WhatsApp, and finally a phone call. She wasn't yelling and she wasn't crying, but the whole conversation was awkward. She said she knew about the kiss. She admitted she didn't like it, but also said she was glad it had been me and not some random girl at the bar. If it had been another woman, she said, she would have considered it cheating and probably reacted way worse. She even said she appreciated that I didn't encourage it or lean into it, but then she told me something that knocked the wind out of me. As much as she didn't blame me, she also didn't feel comfortable with me being at the wedding anymore. She said if I was there, she'd just have this image in the back of her mind, and she wanted her wedding day to be free of those feelings. She asked me not to come. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she asked me not to tell my best friend that it was her idea. I was stunned, then angry, then just sad. But at the end of the day, it was her wedding. And if she didn't want me there, I wasn't going to fight it. I told her I understood and I wouldn't show up. She thanked me for being understanding. So I sent my best friend a text backing out. I told him it was work-related, that something came up with my freelance schedule and I couldn't make it. He didn't take it well. At first he was upset, trying to convince me to rearrange things, but when he realized I wasn't budging, he got angry. He told me I was bailing on him for work. Of all things, on the most important day of his life. Now our mutual friends are all over me in the group chat. Some are guilt-tripping me, others are flat out calling me selfish. They can't understand how I'd prioritize work that I manage myself over standing by my best friend on his wedding day. From their perspective, it looks like I'm just ditching him for no good reason. And because I promised his fiancée I wouldn't tell the truth, I can't defend myself. So here I am, painted as the bad guy, when in reality I'm just trying to respect the bride's wishes and keep the peace. I don't want to lose my best friend over this, but I also don't want to break my word to his fiancée. I'm caught between protecting the truth and protecting my own reputation, and either way, I look like the a-hole. That's where the story ends. This situation shows how loyalty can backfire when caught between conflicting expectations. The kiss wasn't initiated or encouraged, yet the fallout placed blame where it didn't belong. The bride's discomfort dictated the absence, while secrecy left appearances stacked against the friend. It's a reminder that protecting someone else's peace can sometimes come at the cost of one's own reputation, a no-win choice that feels unfair from every angle. This next story is about a new HR director who came in swinging with cold policies and a love for firing people, only to end up getting booted in the exact same humiliating way she treated others. Back in the mid-90s, I worked as an HR manager at a company with what I'd call a surprisingly kind and supportive culture. The place wasn't perfect, but the overall approach to employees was human, warm, and even a little fun. In HR, I tried to emphasize that. Less policing, more helping. If someone was struggling, I wanted to get them resources, not paperwork for termination. When I knew I was moving on, I gave the company plenty of notice. My goal was to train my successor so the transition would be smooth and no one would feel abandoned. That's when they brought in the new HR director. I did my best to fill her in on the traditions and little touches that made the culture special. For example, at Thanksgiving, every employee received a turkey and a $100 bill. Managers also loved to recognize their aides on Secretary's Day, as it was called then. It wasn't mandated or corporate, just something people enjoyed doing. Flowers, lunch, gift cards, or even just a heartfelt card with a check tucked inside. These assistants put in long hours, and their managers genuinely wanted to show appreciation. But almost immediately, this new HR director decided her mission was to cut things down. One of her first actions? Banning Secretary's Day celebrations company-wide. Her reasoning? If one boss forgot to do something for their assistant, that assistant might feel hurt and, in her words, could bring legal action. I kid you not. That was her logic. I sat there stunned. I had no say in hiring her, and suddenly it felt like the culture I'd worked to nurture was being gutted for the sake of her paranoia. That was just the beginning. One by one, the small customs that made the company feel human went on her chopping block. After I left, I stayed in touch with some colleagues who told me things only got worse. The new director seemed to take a kind of sick satisfaction in firing people. Unlike the supportive offboarding I'd always tried to give, career counseling, resume help, suggestions for job leads, she wanted the spectacle. One story still makes me furious when I think about it. There was an employee she clearly didn't like. Instead of addressing issues fairly, she quietly built a case against her. Then, on Take Your Kids to Work Day of all days, she fired this woman in front of her children. No warning, no dignity, just blindsiding her and immediately having her escorted out to the car while her kids cried. The company had never done public escorts before. We didn't even have security guards. She made the mailroom guys do it, and they were apologizing the whole time as they walked this family out. The contrast between her and the old approach was staggering, and yet, she strutted around as though this cold, performative cruelty was what the company needed. But here's the thing about creating a culture of humiliation. It can swing back on you. Within her first year, the company decided they'd had enough of her, and when they fired her, they took their cues from the very practices she'd introduced. No notice, no references. Escorted out to her car in front of the whole office. Employees even clapped as she left. It wasn't a perfect mirror of everything she'd done, but it was close enough to feel poetic. Word spread fast, and pretty soon no one in town wanted to hire her. That story wraps up here. That's pure karma. She walked into a company with a warm culture, stripped it down, and treated people like disposable parts, and then got discarded the same way. Honestly, I love that the employees clapped. It wasn't just her losing a job. It was a whole office saying, "We saw what you did, and we're glad you're gone." Some stories write their own punchlines, and this was definitely one of them. This next story is about a high school parking lot drama that started with a cheerleader demanding a lucky spot, but quickly spiraled into locker notes, principal visits, and even a threat straight out of the Tonya Harding playbook. When the new school year started, my daughter went back to her routine of pulling into the student lot and grabbing whatever spot was open. It's first come, first serve. No one has an assigned space. On Friday, she pulled into a spot, and no sooner had she shut off the engine when the head cheerleader came up behind her, honked, and rolled down her window with a dramatic, excuse me? You're in my spot." My daughter calmly told her that no spots were reserved, and she'd never seen the cheerleader park there regularly anyway. The cheerleader huffed but found another place. That should have been the end of it, except it wasn't. Inside the school, at her locker, my daughter was approached again. This time, the cheerleader demanded she move her car or she'd call a tow truck. My daughter kept her cool and told her politely that it wasn't her space, and if she had to walk a little further, it wasn't going to kill her. Right then, a teacher walked by and asked what was going on. The cheerleader tried to play victim, saying her spot had been stolen, but the teacher shut it down fast. No reserved spots, no drama, end of story. But teenagers don't always let things go. When my daughter returned to her locker later, she found notes taped all over it calling her a parking space thief. That was the last straw. She reported it to the principal, and before long, an announcement came over the PA. "Will cheerleader's name report to the principal's office?" My daughter didn't hear what was said behind closed doors, but she could imagine the conversation. For context, someone later pointed out that the cheerleader probably saw herself as Queen Bee, given her social status. But my daughter isn't exactly invisible either. She's captain of the girls' soccer team, and unlike the cheerleader, she doesn't let it go to her head. Things could have ended there. Petty notes, a trip to the principal's office, lesson learned. But then the mom got involved. As I was grabbing the mail one afternoon, a car came speeding up to me. Out stepped the cheerleader's mother, already heated. I discreetly pulled out my phone and hit record, slipping it into my pocket. She demanded to know why my daughter stole the parking space. I explained calmly that the school doesn't assign spots. It's first come, first serve. But the mom had her own reasoning. She claimed that her daughter needed that exact spot for good luck, because her 3 older kids had all parked there and gone on to good colleges. She actually said her daughter's future depended on keeping it. I couldn't help but laugh. I told her luck isn't tied to asphalt. It's what you make for yourself. I turned to walk away, and that's when she shouted something that made my blood run cold. She said, "Your daughter better watch herself on the soccer field and around school. I'd hate to see her have what happened to Nancy Kerrigan happen to her." For anyone who doesn't remember, that's a reference to an Olympic skater who was assaulted with a metal baton in the 90s. This woman actually threatened my daughter with something like that over a parking spot. Thankfully, I had it all on audio. Every word. If her daughter, or anyone else, tries to make good on that threat, I can hand the recording over to the principal, the school board, or even the police. The story took one last twist. On Friday, the cheerleader herself came up to my daughter and apologized for how she'd acted. She admitted she was wrong and thanked my daughter for hearing her out. They're on better terms now, surprisingly enough. But she also gave my daughter a warning. Her mom isn't letting it go. She overheard her mom talking about leaving notes on cars that parked in the spot, threatening students, and even showing up to confront kids if she didn't get her way. The cheerleader confessed she was too scared to tell the principal herself, because her mom expects her to text every morning to say whether she got the spot. If not, the mom plans to swoop in and demand the driver's name. My daughter pointed out that cameras in the parking lot could catch the mom, and that she could be charged with trespassing and harassment if she kept it up. The cheerleader said she hadn't gone that far yet, out of fear of retaliation. At this point, I'm leaning toward going to the principal myself. A parent shouldn't be stalking the student parking lot, and no kid should be afraid of their own mother. It's one thing for teenagers to argue over a space. It's another when an adult turns superstition into threats of actual violence. That's the end of this story. That escalated fast. What began as typical high school drama became alarming once a parent escalated it. The cheerleader's apology shows awareness, but also reveals the fear she feels toward her own mother. With threats in play, keeping evidence and involving the school isn't overreacting. It's the responsible step to protect everyone involved. This next story is about a mom who's struggling with the way her ex-husband cut ties with their daughter, choosing his wife's comfort over maintaining a relationship with his own child. My ex-husband and I didn't split on good terms. He cheated, the marriage ended, and eventually he even cheated on the woman he had his affair with. After therapy and some time on his own, he met his current wife. She wasn't the one he cheated with. I want to be clear about that. But by the time they got together, our daughter was already 15. From the beginning, it was rocky between them. His wife seemed to view my daughter through a strange lens, like she was some kind of mini-wife, a term I'd only ever heard from stepmom groups online, where they complain about stepdaughters who they think take up too much of their husband's time and attention. It sounds harsh, but that's how she framed it. She got upset that my ex would buy their daughter the same type of jewelry he bought her, claiming there were other ways to show love without copying her gifts. My daughter confided in me that she felt like an outsider in their home, like she was intruding just by being there. I tried to support her, reassured her she wasn't in the wrong, and even got her into therapy so she'd have someone neutral to talk to. Things didn't improve much. Over time, her stepmom scaled back to nothing more than basic courtesy and told my ex she wanted no deeper involvement with his daughter. To her credit, she didn't try to interfere in the co-parenting between me and my ex, and I respected that boundary, but it also meant my daughter never really felt welcome there. The breaking point came when my daughter was around 17. She and her stepmom got into a fight about chores. My daughter admitted she had put off doing something because she wanted to finish talking to her friends first. Instead of just insisting it be done, her stepmom stormed into her room, tore down her belongings, and threw her clothes on the floor while yelling at her to get out of the house. Some of the things she destroyed were expensive gifts from her dad. Her younger siblings were home and witnessed the whole thing. Shaken, my daughter called both me and her father. My ex told her to go stay at my place while he handled it. I thought maybe he'd smooth things over, maybe even step in on her behalf. Instead, the very next day, he sent her a message saying the situation wasn't working anymore, that he had to put his wife first, and that if she was feeling disrespected or anxious whenever my daughter was around, then our daughter was the toxic one. She turned 18 right around then, which made it easy for him to cut ties completely. Since then, she's reached out to him multiple times. He's ignored her messages. Eventually, he told me that if she didn't stop trying, he considered getting a restraining order and was planning to cut her out of his will. His parents confirmed to me recently that he and his wife are moving away. It breaks my heart. I don't want to interfere. I know she's an adult now, and it's between them, but I also can't help but feel that he was looking for an excuse to distance himself and wash his hands of her. And the harshness of it all, it's crushing. To make matters worse, my daughter recently told her dad she's pregnant. She thought maybe the news would soften him, that he'd want to be a part of her life again, maybe even be there as a grandfather. He didn't even acknowledge it. He ignored her message entirely. Meanwhile, he and his wife are trying for another child of their own. So here I am, on the outside, watching this unfold, trying not to interfere, but also feeling deeply hurt on behalf of my daughter. My ex wasn't perfect, but I never imagined he'd turn his back on his own child this way. That's where the story ends. This situation is devastating. A daughter cast aside so her father could protect his wife's comfort instead of nurturing his own child. Labeling her toxic for wanting a relationship shows how far the rejection went, and ignoring her pregnancy only deepens the cruelty. Rather than trying to reconcile, he chose distance and dismissal, leaving a lasting wound. It's a harsh reminder of how damaging it can be when a parent prioritizes self-preservation over unconditional responsibility. This next story is about a mom-to-be whose baby shower turned into a full-blown meltdown, thanks to her sister-in-law, who managed to ruin the very event she insisted on hosting. My husband and I have been married for 10 years. We never had the big wedding reception, just eloped quietly in Paris while traveling for work. After years of trying, we're finally expecting our first baby, and we wanted to celebrate the moment with our friends and family. For context, my husband has one brother who's been married over 15 years. He and his wife decided not to have kids. When we shared our pregnancy news with them, my sister-in-law seemed genuinely excited. She even offered to host our baby shower at her home. I hesitated. She has a strong personality and likes control. But I agreed because I wanted to keep the peace. As the pregnancy progressed, I waited for details about the shower. At 6 months along, no one had said a word. So I finally reached out. My sister-in-law casually said, "Yeah, I guess we should do invites." I sent her the guest list. She never ordered them. So at 6 months pregnant, I had to order and send out my own shower invitations for the event she claimed to be hosting. Soon after, she announced she wanted a co-host to split costs. Fine by me. My close friend Dana stepped in happily. She'd already offered to host something on her own anyway. I also invited my best friend Rebecca, who happens to be an event planner, to help with the logistics. The three of us plus my husband created an Excel sheet of tasks: decor, food, seating, games, and emailed it to everyone, including my sister-in-law. She was included every step of the way. I even confirmed again that she was fine with having it at her house, and she said she was. Communication, though, was a nightmare. My sister-in-law refused to use group Facebook chats. Dana's phone couldn't handle massive group texts, so Dana and Rebecca each tried contacting her individually. Her only contributions? "I'll serve nuts and crackers," and "we have to be out by 4. This, despite originally telling us we could stay as long as needed. The week of the shower, Dana and Rebecca had purchased food and decorations. Everything was ready. The night before, Rebecca messaged her offering help. The reply? "You can come clean my house and cook me dinner." Rebecca, who had just driven 5 hours, had never even met her before. That set the tone. The day of the shower, things went from stressful to chaotic. We were told we couldn't park in the yard or street, only in the driveway, and we couldn't set up until 30 minutes before guests arrived because she had plans. When we showed up, she and an uninvited friend were putting up no parking signs and literally dancing around while we scrambled to set up tables and decorations. Guests arrived while we were still arranging food, and then the performance began. She stomped around, slammed doors, rolled her eyes at people, sat on her phone, whispered snide remarks to her friend, and disappeared to the basement to blast metal music so loud the floor vibrated. She barely spoke to guests, and the one time I tried to approach her, she brushed me off with, "We'll discuss this later." I was 7 months pregnant, already emotional, and ended up in tears. During the gift opening, around 3:30, she started texting my husband, furious, threatening to have cars towed and guests arrested if everyone wasn't out by 4 o'clock sharp. We rushed through presents, packed food as quickly as possible, and tried to clean up. My mother-in-law even asked for the vacuum to help, but my sister-in-law said it was changing and unavailable. When glitter decorations and a little spilled lemonade weren't fully scrubbed out, she went nuclear. As we loaded cars, she stormed outside, screaming about her stolen chair. It wasn't stolen. It had been moved to another room to make space for older guests with mobility issues. She accused Rebecca's husband, who's the baby's godfather and an honorably discharged vet, of being a piece of shh behind his back because she didn't want men there. She complained about folding chairs, decorations, and even the fact that people dared to bring food that required a cookie sheet. When it was all over, she unleashed a Facebook rant. She posted about glitter in her vent, people moving furniture, the lemonade spill, my chair, the guest list, everything she could think of. Then she sent a long group message calling me, Rebecca, and Dana pieces of shh. My husband defended me, and she used that response as ammo to claim on Facebook that I couldn't even stand up for myself. Now my mother-in-law is insisting we apologize to my brother-in-law and sister-in-law to make the holidays normal. But from where I sit, I bent over backward to keep the peace. I did the invites, arranged backup hosts, handled the planning, and still ended up humiliated. That's where the story ends. Family drama around weddings and baby showers is already messy, but this one feels like it crossed into theater of the absurd territory. It's wild how someone can offer to host, contribute the bare minimum, then sabotage the entire event just to complain about it. If anything, it sounds like she thrives on the chaos, and apologizing would just give her more fuel. For me, I'd show up to the holidays, smile, and let her stew in her own glitter. This next story is about a traveler who found themselves in a nightmare cabin stay, and for once, they were the one demanding to speak to the manager. Today, I was the Karen, and honestly, it wasn't something I expected. I was the one traveling, tired from a long day on the road, and I thought I had done everything right. I booked directly on the website of this place that had both hotel rooms and little cabins. The reviews looked good on Google, so I figured I'd be safe. The cabins were cheaper, and the pictures of the outside looked charming enough. That's where I messed up. There were no pictures of the inside, and I didn't think to worry about it. Big mistake. When I walked in, the first thing that hit me was how unbelievably tiny the place was. Not just small, but really, really cramped. There was a mini fridge, a tiny little table, and then a bathroom where the shower was basically on top of the toilet. Only half a roll of toilet paper, hair sitting in the sink, and no real space to move. The bed? It was stuffed into an enclosed area with just enough room for a thin person to slide between the wall and the mattress. The website had promised a kitchenette. What I got was a mini fridge and nothing else. No microwave, no stove, not even a kettle. And the internet reception that was supposed to come with the cabin? Completely dead in that spot. By now, I was exhausted and annoyed. I asked if I could switch units and pay the difference. The only person around was a maintenance worker. He was polite, but told me the reservations office was in another city, and no one was picking up the phone. He tried calling his boss, who said he was on the way 30 minutes ago, but still hadn't shown up. I kept calm. I was polite, but I was also clearly upset. I told the maintenance guy that if I couldn't move to another unit, then I didn't want to stay at all. The whole thing just felt like a mess, and I was too tired to fight. Tomorrow I knew I'd be back on the road and back home in time for my shift at 3 in the afternoon. At my own job, if a guest is upset, I can easily put them in another room. And if they booked a kitchenette, I can guarantee there's an actual kitchenette waiting for them. So the irony wasn't lost on me. I'm usually the one smoothing things over. But this time, I was the guest with the complaint. In the end, I just left. If they don't refund me, I'll do a chargeback. I know exactly how that game is played, since I've helped my boss fight chargebacks before. I know the details of when we win and when we lose. And honestly, they picked the wrong guest to mess with this time. That story wraps up here. That one actually made me laugh a little. It's so ironic when someone who works in hospitality ends up on the other side of the situation. I can picture them calmly pointing out every issue like a professional, but still being just done with it. This next story is about a new server who was publicly humiliated by a customer, only for the restaurant owner to step in and shut it down. On my very first day working at a pizza restaurant, I got thrown into the deep end. This wasn't some quiet little place either. It was always packed. The kind of restaurant where the moment one table clears, another is waiting at the door. Up until then, I'd only worked at places that were either overstaffed or a little slower paced. So this was where I really learned what it meant to handle pressure and be a good server. That day I had about 10 tables at once. Normally I was used to juggling maybe 3 or 4 at a time. The place was buzzing, dishes clattering, people talking over each other, and me trying to keep every order straight in my head. Despite the chaos, I was holding my own. My trays were balanced, the drinks were refilled, the pizzas were getting out on time. Honestly, I felt like I was killing it for a first shift. Then came table 24. I'll never forget them. An older couple, both of them gray-haired and dressed up like they were going to a fine dining restaurant, not a casual pizza joint. They carried themselves with this air of formality, like they expected a white tablecloth and crystal glasses instead of greasy menus and pitchers of soda. Still, I treated them with care. I made sure their order was perfect, checked in on them regularly, and did everything I could to give them the kind of service they seemed to expect. By the time they were ready to leave, I actually felt proud of how I'd handled them, considering how swamped I was with the rest of my tables. That's when things went sideways. The man at table 24 handed me his credit card so I could close out their bill. I rushed to the computer, swiped it, and processed the payment. In my hurry, though, I made one small mistake. I forgot to print the itemized receipt. Normally, that's an easy fix. I could have just hit print and been done with it, but I didn't even get the chance. Instead of simply asking me for it, the man raised his voice. And not just a little. He was loud. His deep, firm tone carried across the whole restaurant. He started tearing into me right there in front of everyone. He called me horrible at my job, told me it was no wonder I was only working at a pizza place, and just kept going with this stream of insults that felt sharper with every word. I tried to walk away to grab the receipt and smooth things over, but he wouldn't let me. He kept talking over me, keeping me pinned there while all my other tables sat and watched the scene unfold. Every second I stood there being berated, I fell further behind. I could feel the stress building in my chest, like I couldn't breathe properly. Then something shifted. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the owner walk in. He must have arrived at just the right moment because he immediately clocked what was happening. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to the table and looked the man dead in the eye. "Excuse me, sir," he said, calm but firm. "I'm the owner of this establishment. I'm not sure what the problem is here, and frankly, I don't care. What I do care about is you belittling my waitress. So I'm going to ask you and your wife to leave and not come back." The man at table 24 sputtered, "Fine, but you'll be losing our business." Without missing a beat, the owner replied, "I really don't care, and I don't want people like you in my restaurant anyway." Then he stood there. Just stood, waiting, making it clear he wasn't going to walk away until they got up and left. And eventually they did. The room, which had gone so quiet during the yelling, seemed to breathe again. It was like the whole restaurant silently agreed the owner had just done something incredible. After they were gone, the owner came over to me. He looked me right in the eye and said, "Forget those people. You're doing a great job. I wouldn't have hired you if I didn't see potential in you. If anyone else talks to you like that, I want you to tell them to get out. I don't want their money." In that moment, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just some frazzled new server trying to prove myself. I was part of a team where the boss actually had my back. That's where the story ends. That's the kind of boss everyone hopes for, but rarely gets. Someone who values the people working for them more than a few dollars on a bill. Honestly, standing there and waiting for the couple to leave makes the whole thing even cooler. It's a reminder that sometimes the strongest move is just not putting up with nonsense. This next story is about a pushy relative who tried to dump her kids on family members for an international trip, no matter how many times she was told no. My boyfriend's cousin is one of those people who thinks the world revolves around her. She has 4 kids, each one a handful on their own, and together they're like a walking storm of noise and chaos. The real problem, though, is that she refuses to discipline them. Anytime they act up, she brushes it off with excuses like, "Oh, they're just kids," or "they have so much energy." And on top of that, she's been really judgmental toward me. She loves to throw in little jabs about how selfish I am for not having kids, as if I'm somehow depriving my boyfriend of the joys of parenthood. Because of her attitude, my boyfriend eventually cut ties with her. He just couldn't take the constant comments and the entitled behavior anymore. But a few days ago, we went back to his parents' house for their anniversary celebration, and of course, she was there. His dad encouraged him to try to mend bridges with her, so we decided to keep things polite. At first, it seemed to be going okay. We were making small talk, just trying to get through the evening without drama. Then my boyfriend casually mentioned that we were heading to Melbourne for a vacation. That's when her eyes lit up. She immediately started going on about how she and her husband hadn't gone anywhere since their honeymoon, and how hard it is raising 4 kids, and how nice it must be to have the luxury of a big trip. You could almost see the gears turning in her head. Sure enough, before long, my boyfriend, because he's generous and kind, offered to pay for a weekend getaway for her family at a resort in Mount Abu. It's a hill station in Rajasthan, beautiful and family friendly. Honestly, it was such a thoughtful gesture, but instead of being grateful, she made a face and said, "That's nice, but why can't you just take us to Melbourne with you?" My boyfriend tried to stay calm. He explained that this was meant to be a trip for just the two of us, that we had friends to meet there, and that Mount Abu was a really wonderful option for her family. But she kept pushing. In this whiny, almost mocking tone, she said we were selfish for going on a big trip while sticking them with what she called a cheap weekend getaway. Even his mom stepped in at that point, telling her she should just be grateful for the offer. But instead of backing down, she came up with what she clearly thought was a brilliant idea. She suggested that she and her husband go to Mount Abu, while we take her kids to Melbourne. I couldn't help myself. I just blurted out, "What?" because the audacity was unreal. She kept insisting it made sense, that her kids should get to spend time with their uncle, and that it would be good for everyone. My boyfriend shut it down immediately. He told her flat out that we were not taking her kids on our vacation, and he gave her one last chance. Either accept the Mount Abu offer or drop it. He even warned her that if she kept pushing, she'd lose the offer entirely. That finally shut her up, at least for the night. Dinner went on, her kids ran around causing chaos, but she kept quiet. I thought that was the end of it. But the next morning, just a few hours before we were supposed to leave, she showed up at our apartment with her kids in tow. I opened the door, completely confused, and asked if something was wrong. She smiled, like it was no big deal, and said, "I'm just here to drop the kids off. You're leaving tonight, right?" I was floored. I asked her if she'd hit her head on something, because we had made it crystal clear we weren't taking her kids. She tried to claim my boyfriend had called her later and agreed to it, which was an obvious lie. When I called her out, she got angry and started accusing us of breaking promises and being heartless for disappointing her kids. I called my boyfriend right then and there, put him on speaker, and explained what was happening. He didn't hold back. He chewed her out, told her she had officially lost the Mount Abu offer, and reminded her that this entitled behavior was exactly why he'd cut ties with her in the first place. She tried to argue, but he didn't let her. Eventually, she stormed off with her kids, and the whole thing ended with us just shaking our heads and laughing about how delusional she had to be to think her plan would ever work. That's the end of this story. That cousin really went above and beyond with the entitlement. Showing up at someone's door with kids packed and ready like it was already agreed to is next level. Honestly, it's almost funny in how over the top it is, but also kind of wild that she thought it would work. It's one of those moments again where you realize some people just don't understand boundaries at all. This next story is about a restaurant worker who expected a tough customer call but ended up with something much more emotional instead. Working in a busy restaurant, I've learned to dread certain types of phone calls. You know the ones I'm talking about? The calls that come after a takeout order goes wrong. Sometimes it's something small, like a woman who ordered steak but got chicken and just wants it fixed next time. Other times it's more extreme, like a guy who finds a single onion in his taco and acts like the world is ending, demanding everyone gets fired. Those calls always make my stomach sink, because you never know which way it's going to go. At my store, the usual procedure is to get a manager right away if a customer calls in with a complaint. But over time, I realized I actually handle those situations better than most of my managers. I can usually calm people down, keep things professional, and make sure they leave the conversation happier than they started. My managers knew this too, so they trusted me to take the calls when I was working. It was a Thursday evening, always one of our busiest nights because we run a burrito special. The place was packed. Customers filled the dining area, the kitchen was running full throttle, and Uber Eats drivers were constantly coming in and out picking up orders. If you've ever worked in a restaurant with delivery apps, you know how chaotic that can get. Drivers sometimes add comments to the orders too, little extra requests that can make or break the experience for the customer. After a while, when the initial rush finally slowed down, I picked up one of the Uber orders. In the comments, this man had written, "Could you please add napkins and draw a smiley face on something to make me a little happy tonight?" That one simple request hit all of us in the heart. I showed the note to the other servers, and right away everyone wanted to help. Instead of just one little doodle, we went all out. We made over 50 notes. Some were jokes, some were silly drawings. Others were short, cheerful messages. A couple of us even wrote tiny stories. And on top of that, we slipped in an extra side of queso, just to brighten his night a little more. By the time the order left, we were smiling and laughing, hoping it would make him smile too. It felt good doing something kind, even for a stranger we'd never meet face to face. Later that night, just as I was about to clock out, another server came up to me. She said there was a man on the phone asking to speak to a manager, but all of the managers were tied up. She asked if I could take it. My heart sank a little. I thought, great, right before I leave, I have to deal with one of those angry customer calls. Still, I picked up the phone and tried to sound calm and professional. The man on the line introduced himself and said he was the one who had placed that Uber Eats order. I braced myself for a complaint, but instead he surprised me completely. He told me he just wanted to say thank you. He said all of the notes had touched him so deeply that he started crying when he opened the bag. And then, right there on the phone, he actually started crying again. I didn't even know what to say. My mind went blank, and all I could think to do was tell him how much we appreciated him, that we loved serving him, and that we hoped we could continue to brighten his week. Then he shared something even more personal. He explained that he hadn't been able to leave his house in years. His weekly splurge, his one treat, was ordering from our restaurant. It was the highlight of his week, and what we had done with those notes meant more to him than we could have imagined. I felt my eyes welling up as I listened. I quickly asked him to hold on and ran to get the other servers. I put the phone on speaker and said, "Hello from Chain Mexican Restaurant. We all just wanted to say have a great night." The whole team jumped in at once, voices overlapping. "Have a good night. Enjoy your burrito. We'll see you next week." The room filled with cheerful shouts, and you could hear his soft laugh through the phone, even as he sniffled back tears. When the others had finished, I took him off speaker. I told him that he wasn't just a valued customer anymore. He was now a friend of ours. I thanked him again before we said goodbye and hung up. A few minutes later, I sat in my car, just staring at the steering wheel, tears running down my own face. I couldn't stop thinking about this stranger, who had been so touched by something so small, and I hoped, more than anything, that we really did help him feel a little less alone that night. That's where this story ends. That one hit different. Sometimes it's the tiniest gestures that end up meaning the most to someone. I like how it flipped from a dreaded customer call into something that actually brought everyone closer. It's wild to think a stack of little notes and some queso could have that kind of impact. Makes you wonder how many small things we do that stick with people way longer than we realize. This next story is about a restaurant worker who had to step in when a regular customer started choking during a date, only to have the situation spiral with the date accusing them of doing harm. I've been in the restaurant world a long time. I'm 30 now, working toward my PhD, and I still serve full-time while managing at a Greek bistro I've been with since I was a teenager. I started bussing tables at 15, almost 16, and never left because the owners treat me like family. It's the kind of place where the regulars are known by name, and after so many years, the restaurant feels like a second home to me. One of our longtime regulars is a guy I'll call Andy. He works at a mattress store nearby and usually comes in for lunch. He's one of those people who always has a smile, always has a kind word, and has built a bit of a reputation with the staff as a favorite. Andy's a big guy, probably close to 400 pounds, but what really stands out about him is just how genuinely nice he is. A few months ago, Andy came in one evening, which was unusual since he normally only shows up during the day. He wasn't alone this time. He walked in with a woman who looked to be maybe 10 years older than him. It didn't take long for us to realize they were on a date. Right away, the owner's wife made sure he and his guest got our best table, and we even sent over a complimentary glass of champagne. We wanted to make him feel special since we all liked him so much. When it came time to order, Andy went with our meat platter. It's a huge spread, packed with different cuts and flavors. His date ordered a vegetarian platter. Things seemed to be going smoothly. I remember glancing over at one point and seeing them laughing, leaning toward each other, clearly enjoying themselves. But then, in an instant, everything changed. I heard this sharp gasp from his date, and when I turned my head, Andy's face was blue. His hands were clutching at his throat. My stomach dropped. I've been trained in first aid, and I knew what I was looking at. He was choking. I rushed over immediately and started the Heimlich maneuver. I was doing everything by the book. Thrust to force the obstruction out. The owner called 911 while I kept working, but as I was trying to save his life, his date completely lost it. Out of nowhere, she started hitting me with her purse, shouting in my face, "You're hurting him! I took first aid, that's not right!" She screamed. It was surreal. Andy couldn't breathe, and she was actively stopping me from helping him. The owner had to physically pull her back while she kept yelling. Meanwhile, I stayed locked in on Andy, focusing on what I had to do. Finally, after what felt like forever, the piece of steak shot out and Andy gasped for air. He was breathing again, but he sounded wheezy, so when the paramedics arrived, they checked him over right away. While they worked, his date kept going on, accusing me of hurting him, as if she hadn't just watched him nearly suffocate. The paramedics, though, shut that down quickly. They told her I'd saved his life, and that if I hadn't stepped in when I did, things could have turned out much worse. Andy was taken to the hospital just to be safe, and she threw me one last dirty look before leaving with him. I'll never forget the intensity of that moment. His face blue, her screaming, me trying to hold it all together while doing the right thing. 2 days later, Andy came back in for lunch with one of his coworkers. He thanked me over and over again, clearly emotional about it. Then he told me, very matter-of-factly, that the date with that woman had been their first, and definitely their last. Fast forward to more recently, Andy came in again, this time with his new girlfriend. She was warm, friendly, and seemed to genuinely enjoy the restaurant. Most importantly, she was kind to him. Watching him smile and relax with her after everything that happened before made all of us on staff feel relieved. That story wraps up here. That was a roller coaster. The image of someone trying to stop a life-saving maneuver blows my mind. I'm glad Andy's okay and that he realized right away that date wasn't worth sticking around for. It's also nice to hear he found someone better, because that whole experience sounded exhausting. Some people just really show you their true colors in a crisis. This next story is about a neighbor who repeatedly ignored a restraining order and ended up escalating things so far that the police had to get involved. I've had issues with my neighbor for a long time now. She's entitled, constantly crossing boundaries, and because of past incidents, I already have a restraining order against her. To give you some background, she's tried to send her sister and her sister's kids onto my property before, and she's made my life difficult in more ways than I can count. The restraining order wasn't something I ever wanted to file, but her behavior left me no choice. Luckily, I've already got security cameras all around my property. They're motion activated and send notifications to my phone whenever something unusual happens. Honestly, they've saved me a lot of stress. I don't have to guess or second guess if something happened. There's always proof. One evening, I came home from work and got a notification that my package was on the way. Since I like to be there when deliveries happen, especially with my neighbor's track record, I went outside to wait. Before long, the delivery truck pulled up. The driver knows me pretty well by now, so we chatted as I signed for the package. Out of nowhere, here comes my neighbor, storming over like she owns the street. She kept a bit of distance at first, but she was shouting demands. She pointed at my package and insisted that it was hers. The delivery driver calmly told her it wasn't, and that he couldn't hand it over to anyone but the intended recipient. Instead of dropping it, she doubled down, saying if he didn't give it to her, she'd just come over and grab it herself. I reminded her, point blank, that if she took another step toward me, she'd be breaking the restraining order. There's a set distance she's legally not allowed to cross. She didn't care. She marched right up and started screaming at me, saying, "Because of you, I'm separated from my husband and heading for divorce." I told her straight up that if she hadn't been acting the way she had all this time, her husband probably wouldn't have gotten sick of it. She finally stomped off back to her house, still fuming. After that little episode, I made sure to get the delivery driver's name and phone number. That way, if she tried anything, I'd have a witness to her breaking the order. Sure enough, I ended up calling the police. While I was outside a few minutes later, I heard her screaming at the top of her lungs, insisting she hadn't broken any restraining order. The next morning, I went to check my mailbox, and that's when I ran into her husband. He's not part of the restraining order, so we were able to talk. He told me the loud screaming I'd heard was her shouting at the police, Apparently, when they confronted her, she completely lost control. She assaulted an officer, resisted arrest, and was taken into custody for breaking the restraining order. She even tried calling her husband from jail to ask for bail money, but he refused to pay. Not long after, things moved quickly. She ended up in court, and the judge sentenced her to 1 year and 210 days in prison. That broke down to a year for assaulting the officer, 60 days for resisting arrest, and another 150 days for violating the restraining order. The judge also heard from her husband, who was officially filing for divorce. The plan now is that once she's released, she'll have to stay with her next of kin under an ankle monitor until the divorce trial finishes. It was a long road getting here, but watching her face consequences after so many warnings and so many chances, it was surreal. That's the end of this story. That whole situation escalated so fast, but honestly, it sounds like it was only a matter of time. Some people just keep pushing until they hit a wall, and in this case, the wall was the law. It's kind of wild that the husband finally reached his breaking point too, right in the middle of all that chaos. Hearing how it played out, I can see why the storyteller made sure to have cameras and witnesses. That was the only way to get through something this messy. This next story is about a boyfriend who surprised his girlfriend with concert tickets, only for her to choose to go with her best friend instead of him. My girlfriend and I are both 26, and we've been together for 3 years. She's a massive Taylor Swift fan, so when she found out Taylor was going to be performing at MetLife Stadium, right near where we live, she was beyond excited. I knew right away that this was something she would want to go to more than anything. So I decided I was going to surprise her. The day the tickets went on sale, I even called in sick to work so I could be ready for the Ticketmaster queue. I sat there staring at the screen for 2 hours, nervously waiting while the little loading bar crept forward. Finally, when my turn came up, I jumped on the seats as fast as I could. They were $400 each, and I grabbed 2, one for her and one for me. That evening, when she came back from work, I was so excited to surprise her. I handed her the tickets, and she was absolutely ecstatic. She jumped up, hugged me, and kept saying how incredible it was. I was feeling pretty great about myself because I thought this was the perfect surprise. But then, when I mentioned how excited I was to go with her, her whole reaction shifted. She looked confused and told me she thought the 2 tickets were for her and her best friend, who's also a huge Taylor Swift fan. That hit me harder than I expected. In my mind, this was going to be a memory we created together, something we'd look back on years from now. She must have noticed how disappointed I looked, because she quickly said she would be happy to go with me instead. But I told her she should go with whoever she actually wanted to go with more. I didn't want her to feel like she had to take me just because I was the one who bought the tickets. The second those words left my mouth, she immediately called her best friend and told her that they were going to the Taylor Swift concert together. That stung, like a punch in the gut. I sat there realizing I had basically just been cut out of the whole experience. I told her, though, that if her best friend wanted to go, she'd need to pay me for the ticket. And to her credit, she did. So, while my girlfriend and her friend were off at the concert screaming their hearts out to Taylor, I stayed behind. They both had a great time, but I couldn't shake this sinking feeling of betrayal. It wasn't just about the money, though $400 isn't exactly small change. It was about the fact that I thought I was creating a memory for us, something special we could share. I've never even been to a concert before, and while I'm not as big a Swiftie as my girlfriend, I do enjoy some of Taylor's music. For me, it was about being there together. Instead, I was left wondering if I'd been too quick to give up my ticket. Should I have held my ground and made it clear that I wanted to go? Or was I right to step back and let her choose? That's where the story ends. That one leaves kind of a heavy feeling. You can tell the guy really wanted it to be a shared memory, not just a gift to hand off. It's tough when your idea of a special moment doesn't line up with the other person's. Honestly, even though she had a fun time, it's not hard to see why he walked away feeling like the odd one out. Sometimes the sting isn't in the money or the ticket, but in who you thought would be standing next to you. This next story is about a couple's night out that turned tense when their server publicly confronted them over a tip. A few nights ago, my partner and I went out to an Italian restaurant we've been to a handful of times. It's not some super high-end, white tablecloth kind of place, but it's nice enough. The sort of spot where you can order a glass of wine, enjoy a quiet meal, and expect a decent evening without too much fuss. The night started fine, but it quickly became clear that our server, let's call her Samantha, wasn't exactly on her game. At first, she misplaced my drink order. I figured it was just a mix-up, nothing major. Then it happened again. My starter came out wrong, which slowed things down even more. And when we were ready for dessert, she vanished for what felt like forever. Now, I've worked in customer service myself, so I understand how chaotic things can get on a busy night. Mistakes happen, and usually I let little things slide. But all in all, the service that evening was pretty poor. Still, it wasn't the end of the world. We finished our meal, asked for the check, and got ready to head out. When the bill came, I paid and left a cash tip. 10%. Not a huge amount, but not nothing either. In my mind, it was fair considering how the night had gone. My partner and I stood up to leave, ready to put the whole thing behind us. But then Samantha walked over, picked up the cash, and looked right at me. She said out loud, "Seriously? This is it?" Her voice carried enough that several nearby diners turned to look. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze, and the air got heavy in an instant. I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say at first. My girlfriend looked uncomfortable, like she just wanted to disappear. And before I could even respond, Samantha doubled down. She said, "You know, servers can't pay their rent because of people like you. If you can't tip properly, don't dine out." At that point, the restaurant was dead silent, like one of those sitcom moments when everything stops after someone says something awkward. I stayed calm and just said, "Okay, sorry you feel that way." Then I turned and started to walk away, hoping to diffuse things. But as we were leaving, I heard her mutter, "Whatever, cheapskates," loud enough that it was clearly directed at us and anyone else listening. That crossed a line for me. I walked back over, leaned down to the table, and took my tip back without saying another word. We left the restaurant in silence, both of us processing what had just happened. Later, my girlfriend told me I'd handled it fine, that I'd stayed calm and didn't escalate things. But when I shared the story with a friend, he told me I overstepped by grabbing the tip back, that no matter what, once you leave it, you just walk away. For me, it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that I had left a tip, and instead of just accepting it, Samantha had chosen to scold me, embarrass me in front of other diners, and then insult us on our way out. That felt completely out of bounds. That's where the story ends. That's such a weird position to be put in. On one hand, tipping is always a touchy subject, but on the other, no one deserves to get called out and insulted like that in front of a room full of people. I think a lot of us would have been tempted to do the same thing, take the money back, and leave. What stands out most is how quickly a quiet night out can flip into one of those surreal, "did that really just happen" moments. This next story is about a student whose professor publicly mocked them during a test, only to be left embarrassed when the truth came out. For a little background, I'm hard of hearing. Not to the point where I need hearing aids just yet, but enough that it can get in the way sometimes, especially in loud or echoey places. At my university, most of our big lectures, tests, and finals were held in these old auditoriums. The acoustics in those rooms were terrible. The sound bounced around, making it hard for me to catch everything professors were saying. Because of that, I made it a point to let my professors know ahead of time, usually at the start of the year, that I might need things repeated now and then. That way they wouldn't assume I was zoning out or ignoring them if I asked. It was exam season, one of those long, exhausting stretches where it feels like your whole life is just back-to-back studying and tests. On this particular day, we had an exam scheduled after a full day of classes. By the time we walked into the auditorium, everyone was already tired and cranky. The professor in charge was known for being strict and short-tempered. She didn't exactly have a reputation for patience, so everyone usually tried to stay out of her way. As soon as we stepped into the room, she started shouting directions at us. She was trying to tell us where to put our backpacks and personal belongings before we sat down, but her voice was echoing all over the place. To give you an idea, the usual setup during exams was that we had to pile our backpacks on one side of the room and only bring a pen to our desk. Then, after the test, we'd go collect our things. Very old school, very strict. But with the echo and her yelling, I couldn't make out exactly where she was telling us to put our stuff. So I just paused for a second. I tried watching where other students were going, figuring if I followed their lead, I'd end up in the right spot. I thought that would be the easiest way not to cause a fuss. But apparently she noticed me standing there and not moving fast enough for her liking. Suddenly, she turned bright red and screamed across the room at me. Bring your backpack to the front. What are you, deaf? The words hit like a slap. The entire room went dead silent. Dozens of students stopped what they were doing and turned to look. All eyes were on me. My heart jumped, but instead of shrinking, I just said it plainly. Yes, I actually am. I told you this at the beginning of the year. My voice wasn't angry. I kept it calm and clear, but loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. The effect was instant. Her face drained of color, then turned bright red again, and she stumbled over her words. She muttered something about bringing the backpack to the front and quickly looked away. Meanwhile, my best friend, sitting just a couple of rows away, had to literally bite her finger to keep from bursting out laughing and getting herself kicked out. Even the assistant professor couldn't hold back completely. She covered her mouth with her hand to hide a chuckle and actually gave me a quick wink. That was enough to make me feel like at least someone in the room had my back. After the exam, when I went to the front to hand in my test and pick up my bag, the professor looked down at her shoes and muttered an apology. She wouldn't look me in the eye. The grin on the assistant professor's face made it clear this was not something the main professor did often. It was like watching a moment she'd been waiting for. From that point on, for the rest of the year, that professor never once looked me directly in the eye again. It was as if the memory embarrassed her too much to even acknowledge me. And honestly, I was perfectly fine with that. That's where this story ends. That's one of those moments where the comeback isn't even planned. It just lands perfectly. I can imagine how awkward that silence must have felt for the professor after the whole class heard it. There's something funny about how quickly people fold when they get called out for being careless with their words. And honestly, I like that the assistant professor couldn't even hide her reaction. It makes the whole thing feel like a small win in the middle of exam stress. This next story is about a longtime friendship that fell apart after a woman discovered her best friend's husband snooping through her phone while she wasn't there. For some background, my best friend and I had been inseparable for years. We'd known each other since we were little, went through high school together, and stuck by each other through every high and low. She was someone I truly thought would always be in my life. I was even her maid of honor at her wedding, and at one point we got matching tattoos together. That's how close we were. To make things even more layered, I had been friends with her husband before the two of them ever got together. I respected their relationship and always kept my bond with him in that friendly, supportive lane. In fact, I considered him one of my best friends too. That's why what happened next blindsided me and left me feeling completely betrayed. One day, she and I decided to go for a long walk. A new grocery store had opened in our small town, and believe it or not, that was exciting for us. Small towns don't get new places often, so this was like a little event. Since I like to unplug when I'm spending time with her, I left my phone at her house. About halfway through our walk, her husband called her. He said that my phone alarm was going off back at the house. I thought that was weird since I didn't have any alarm set, but I didn't think too much of it. He asked for my passcode so he could shut it off, and since I trusted both of them completely, I gave it to her to pass along. By the time we got back, it had been about 3.5 hours. I checked my phone and sure enough, the alarm app was open in the background, which made sense since he had gone in to turn it off. But here's the thing, my phone wasn't left on that app. It was sitting on a completely different screen, my homepage. Now this may not sound like much, but I have this little OCD tendency where I always swipe back to my homepage before I lock my phone. Always. If I forget, I'll unlock my phone just to swipe to the homepage before locking it again. It's a routine that's basically muscle memory for me. So I immediately noticed something was off. Then I saw that I had missed a call from my boyfriend and a bunch of Snapchat notifications from a work friend's group chat. I asked her husband if that was the alarm he heard, and he avoided eye contact. He just kind of shrugged and vaguely said, "I don't know, it was just some alarm sound." Something about his tone set off alarms in my head, the real kind. Later that night, when I was telling my roommate about what happened, she suggested checking my screen time history. That's when things got really unsettling. According to screen time, while I was gone, my phone had been open on Snapchat for about 15 minutes, in my photos for another 15 minutes, in Google Photos for 10 minutes, and in my text messages for around 5 minutes. Meanwhile, the clock app, the one he supposedly went in to shut off an alarm, showed only 15 seconds. For anyone who doesn't know, screen time doesn't just log apps that get notifications in the background. It only records active use when the app is open on the screen, which meant he wasn't just clicking into them by accident. He had been actively using them, looking through them. I confronted my best friend about all of this. At first, she seemed willing to hear me out, but then she went to her husband for his side of the story. That's when the excuses started rolling in. He said he only opened the apps with notifications and closed them without looking. Then he changed it to say he was just trying to silence things. But none of his explanations made sense, and none of them explained why he was in my photos, which don't have alarms or notifications at all. When I pressed harder and showed her the screen time evidence, her response crushed me. She said, "Do you have proof he went through your photos? I just don't understand why you're so adamant that he's lying." I couldn't believe it. I had laid out the facts, and she was still defending him. After that, I told her I needed space. It's now been 3 months since I've spoken to either of them. I had to change my phone number recently because of unrelated issues, so she wouldn't even be able to reach out now if she wanted to. My boyfriend wants absolutely nothing to do with them. He's convinced her husband was snooping for private pictures, and honestly, I can't say I disagree. He thinks it's best we leave that friendship in the past. And that's where I am now. Heartbroken, betrayed, and stuck wondering whether I should even bother trying to repair something that feels so broken, or just cut my losses and move on. That's where this story finishes. That's a rough situation to be in, especially with a friendship that deep. What makes it sting more is how small details, like screen time logs, end up exposing things people thought they could hide. It's one of those moments that shows how trust can get broken in an instant, even after years of loyalty. And honestly, when someone chooses denial over facing the truth, it makes it even harder to see a way back. This next story is about a neighborhood fed up with one family's non-stop loud music, leading to a hilarious and unexpected sound battle that brought everyone else closer together. I live in a small town, tucked away in one of those quiet neighborhoods where most people just mind their business. The houses aren't crammed together, but they're not far apart either. We all kind of know each other, enough to wave hello and step in if there's an emergency, but otherwise it's a very live and let live kind of place. You stay on your side, I'll stay on mine, and everyone's happy. It's also a very multicultural neighborhood, which I've always thought was one of the best things about it. You get this mix of backgrounds, languages, and little traditions that you catch glimpses of here and there. Normally, it makes the area feel unique and welcoming. But a few months ago, a new family moved in, and things changed fast. At first, it was standard. People stopped by to welcome them, offered help settling in, all that. They weren't openly hostile, but they were different. Cold, kind of rude. Like, they didn't really want to be bothered. That would have been fine, except it didn't stop there. Pretty quickly, their kids started treating the neighborhood like their personal playground. I'm talking about hide-and-seek games at midnight, doorbell ditching like it was a full-time job, and running wild without much supervision. On top of that, they seemed to collect cars like they were Pokemon. Cars parked everywhere, blocking people in, and one time they even blocked a school bus. The noise didn't stop at the cars, though, because then came the music. When I say music, I don't mean the occasional backyard barbecue playlist. I mean all day, every day, at levels that made me feel like I was living across from a stadium. And the worst part wasn't the volume, it was the actual music itself. Imagine being forced to listen to the same handful of bubblegum pop songs on repeat, mix in 2 VeggieTales tracks, roll into some Kids Bop nightmares, and then start the whole cycle over. That's what it was like. The same 15 or so songs, blasting on loop, day after day. At first, neighbors tried being nice about it. Some of us had friendly conversations with them. Others called the police, who came by a couple of times. None of it changed anything. The music kept on going, like clockwork. After a while, I think we all just silently bonded over our shared frustration. Then, about 5 days ago, something incredible happened. The usual VeggieTales rotation started up in the morning, loud as ever. But then, faintly in the background, I heard something else. Polka music. And not just polka, but the loudest, most determined Oompa band you can imagine, blasting from 2 houses down. It was so unexpected that I actually laughed out loud. And that was just the beginning. The bubblegum pop got louder, then the polka came back even stronger. After about an hour of this back and forth, another neighbor joined in. An auntie from the other side of the street started blasting her Hispanic cleaning music, the kind you can almost smell the pine cleaner to. Suddenly, we had a full-blown neighborhood sound battle going on. To paint the picture, I was standing in my yard right at the southern point of this whole thing. The new family, with their endless veggie tales, was blasting from the center. Polka was booming from the east. Angry Auntie had the west covered. And to the north, like fate itself wanted in, trains started rolling through the nearby tracks. 5 crossings within 3 blocks. Horns blaring. It was chaos. It was glorious. I couldn't help but laugh, and I had to call my husband to tell him what was happening. While I was narrating it, he cut me off and said, "Doesn't your stereo still work?" And that's when it hit me. Oh, it was time to contribute. I hauled my big stereo out of the living room, wrestled it on top of my truck, ran an extension cord, and fired it up. The first song I chose was Flying Whales by Gojira, blasting so loud the ground felt like it was vibrating. Then I switched it to Bluetooth and started running a rotation. Korpiklani, Fawn, Sabaton, Oomph, Iron Maiden. It became this insane multicultural music showdown, everyone throwing in their own sounds, like some chaotic symphony. We kept it going for 4 straight hours. People were laughing, doing yard work to their chosen battle tracks, and honestly, it was the most connected I'd felt to my neighbors in a long time. The funniest part? Ever since that day, the neighborhood has been quiet. We're on day 6 now. The family is still home, but their speakers haven't come back on. It's peaceful again, and as a bonus, I actually got to know some of my neighbors better because of that ridiculous sound war. That's the end of this story. That whole thing sounds like the most entertaining way possible for a neighborhood to come together. It's funny how shared frustration can turn into something almost fun when people get creative about it. Honestly, a 4-hour music battle with that mix of genres must have felt surreal but also kind of epic in its own right. And it's wild how the quiet afterwards probably felt like the sweetest victory. This next story is about a host who discovered one of their guests secretly borrowed a book during their stay, only to mail it back weeks later with an unexpected note. I rent out a space in my home that has its own private entrance but still connects to the rest of the house. I've been hosting for a while, and I've earned superhost status, which just means I try to keep things professional and comfortable for anyone who books. Most of my guests are business travelers, since I live in a big city close to an international airport, so usually it's quiet and uneventful. Honestly, I rarely even have much direct contact with people who stay. One time though, I had a woman book the space for herself and her husband. From the moment they arrived, I noticed something a little different. Even though their rental was on the lower level, I could still hear them bickering now and then. Nothing extreme, no yelling or anything like that. More like those hushed, tense arguments couples sometimes have when they're trying not to draw attention but can't quite hold it in. What stood out more was their routine. Instead of heading out together each day, they seemed to alternate. One would leave the house alone while the other stayed behind. Then, in the evenings, when the one who went out returned, the quiet arguments would start back up again. It wasn't disruptive enough to be a problem, but it was something I couldn't help but notice in the background. Down on their level of the house, there's a rec room. It's got a pool table I don't really use anymore, and along one wall, there's a bookshelf with a random collection of books I've picked up over the years. Most of them I don't even think about anymore, but I like having them there. It makes the space feel cozy and gives guests something to flip through if they're bored. Their stay went fine overall. They didn't cause any damage, and they weren't loud or disrespectful. Aside from the low-level bickering, they actually seemed to be trying hard not to bother me. I decided not to make anything of it. When they left, the place was clean, and they even left me a kind review. I pretty much put them out of my mind after that. Fast forward about 3 weeks later. I get this package in the mail, and at first I don't recognize the return address. I open it up, and inside is a book I honestly had forgotten I even owned. It was called Why Men Love Bitches. I had bought it back in my early 20s and never really thought about it since. I'll admit I cringed a little seeing it again, because it's one of those titles that makes you laugh and feel slightly embarrassed at the same time. But what really surprised me was the note tucked inside. It was from the woman who had stayed with her husband. She wrote, "Thanks for your kindness and for this read. I didn't mean to take it, but once I started it at your house, I wanted to finish it as soon as possible, and I was embarrassed to ask. I didn't want to steal it, so I just borrowed it. It helped. Love, guest." I just sat there for a second, smiling at how unexpected the whole thing was. She had apparently picked the book up during their stay, gotten hooked on it, and couldn't put it down. Instead of asking if she could borrow it, she slipped it into her things and took it with her, probably meaning to mail it back once she was done. And true to her word, she did. As a woman in my 30s now, I wouldn't exactly recommend that book to anyone. It's one of those self-help titles that feels more like a time capsule than solid advice. But still, the fact that she found it helpful in that moment was kind of sweet, and the whole situation ended up making me laugh more than anything. Out of all my hosting experiences, that's definitely one I won't forget. Part of me hopes that little borrowed book really did make some kind of difference for them. That story wraps up here. That's one of those quirky little stories that sticks with you. It's funny how something as small as a random old book on a shelf can end up playing a part in someone else's life. Honestly, the fact that she mailed it back with a note makes it even better, because most people wouldn't bother, and it kind of shows how the most unexpected moments are what make things memorable. This next story is about a homeowner who turned the tables on a power-hungry HOA board after they unfairly targeted him with petty fines. When I first bought my house, I was honestly excited. It was my first real step into owning property, and I felt proud of the choice I made. The neighborhood wasn't too big, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 homes, and one of the reasons I picked it was because the HOA seemed easygoing. They had the lowest dues in the whole city, barely any rules, and it let me buy a house that was nicer than anything else I could have afforded at the time. I figured, perfect. But then, not even a month into living there, I got slapped with my first violation notice. 2 violations, actually. The first said my lawn wasn't green enough, and the second said my trash cans were too close to my driveway. Now, keep in mind, this was February, middle of winter. Nobody's lawn was green. Mine looked just like everyone else's. As for the trash cans, I kept them on the side of my house. Maybe they stuck out a foot past the wall, but still, it was hardly an eyesore. I figured it must have been a mistake, maybe even a leftover complaint from the previous owner. I shrugged it off and didn't think much of it. Then March rolled around and I got another notice. This one wasn't just a warning, it was a fine. They wanted $100 for each violation, and I had 2 weeks to pay up. I was furious. It made no sense at all, and I wasn't about to hand over money for something this ridiculous. So I called the management company that worked with the board to get some answers. The woman on the phone told me if I wanted to fight it, I had to show up at the annual HOA meeting and appeal directly to the board. Fine, I'd do it. When I got to the meeting, I started chatting with a few neighbors before things officially began. Pretty quickly, I realized I wasn't alone. A bunch of them were there for the same reason. Petty violations, crazy fines, just plain nonsense. Then I went up to one of the board members, an older guy with gray hair who looked perpetually angry, and asked how I could appeal my fines. He listened and then said flat out, "And you should get fined for that. Young people like you not taking care of their homes is the whole reason I got on this board." The condescension in his voice lit a fire under me. Then the meeting started, and that's when I learned something important. Since it was the annual meeting, they'd be voting on 3 out of the 5 board seats. Anyone could nominate themselves. That's when it hit me. If they wanted to play games with me, maybe I could play one right back. When the time came, I nominated myself. I gave this speech about how HOAs weren't supposed to exist to squeeze money out of people, but to help build a sense of community. The crowd loved it. When the votes came in, I won by a landslide. The board looked visibly annoyed. I could almost see them grinding their teeth as I shook hands and took a seat. After the meeting, I appealed my violations again. They dropped the trash can fine, but still held me to the lawn violation. Apparently, because I had weeds that had turned yellow after I sprayed them, that was enough for a technicality. I ended up losing $100, but honestly, I was already thinking about the long game. Being on the board gave me access to all kinds of records and conversations. They made me secretary, which meant I had to take notes and sit quietly while the president and VP tried to push through new rules. They even told me I wasn't allowed to propose new policies, which, by the way, wasn't even allowed under their own bylaws. But that didn't stop me from voting against everything I thought was unnecessary. And while I was doing that, I was also taking notes, watching, waiting. The first real opportunity came when the president tried to pass a policy that would fine people for having flowers that weren't neutral colors. She didn't like that her neighbor had turquoise flowers, so she wanted to weaponize the HOA against them. That was my opening. I rallied the other board members through our Slack messages, pointing out how ridiculous and personal this policy was. Eventually, we called a meeting, and the rest of the board voted her out. Just like that, she was gone. One down. I got one of my neighbors to take her spot. Someone I knew would be on my side. From there, I set my sights on the treasurer and the director. They weren't mean, just weak, easily swayed. So, I created a fake account on Nextdoor and started stirring the pot whenever new violation letters went out. People would post their frustrations, and I'd reply, "Oh, that's the treasurer's doing," or "You should bring that up with the director." By the next HOA meeting, the room was packed with angry homeowners ready to call them out. They crumbled under the pressure and resigned. 2 more down. That left just one, the VP, who had now become the president. He was the same angry man who had insulted me in the beginning. He fought hard, always trying to push new rules, but with 4 out of 5 of us against him, he kept getting blocked. He stayed on, though, refusing to resign. I couldn't shake him until the new management company came in. With them, everything was more transparent. They gave us clean records, including fines. And that's when I saw it. His name. Our president owed around $10,000 in unpaid fines. For years, the old management company had been covering for him, but now it was all in black and white. Our bylaws said that if a homeowner owed more than $3,000 in unpaid fines, the board could vote to foreclose on their house. That power shocked me, but I wasn't about to let it slide. I double-checked the numbers with the management company, and they confirmed it. Then I called an emergency board meeting. I presented the evidence, and we voted. 4-1, we agreed to start the foreclosure process. The president erupted in anger, cursed, and stormed out of the room. A few days later, he resigned, paid his fines, and put his house up for sale. While I didn't get to see the foreclosure through, it didn't matter. He was gone. The board was finally flipped, and I became president. Since then, I've relaxed the rules, lowered the maximum fines, and made it possible for anyone to appeal online. Grass fines don't even start until May, and trash can violations are barely enforced, all because they thought they could bully me with a couple of petty fines. That's the end of this story. That was wild from start to finish. It's kind of amazing how a small fight over weeds and trash cans spiraled into a complete takeover of the board. Honestly, it shows how much persistence can shift the balance of power when people team up. And I have to admit, the way the storyteller used patience and strategy instead of just yelling back was pretty satisfying to hear. This next story is about a student teacher who was mistaken for a middle school camper by an entitled parent, leading to a heated confrontation in front of everyone. I've been student teaching this spring in a 6th grade class, and while it's been stressful, it's also been a really good experience. From the very first day, the teachers I worked with treated me like a colleague, not just some kid tagging along. That meant a lot to me, especially because I have a very baby-faced look. People don't always realize I'm in my 20s. Luckily, the kids already respected me because I had subbed for them last year. So we had a solid relationship. Now fast forward to this week. We went on a big camping trip with 4 different classes. Even though I technically finished student teaching already, my mentor teacher invited me to come along as part of the staff. She said it would be a good experience, and I was excited for it. My main responsibility was pretty simple: hang out in the medical lodge and make sure kids got their daily medication. Compared to running a classroom, it was a breeze. Plus, the kids were excited to see me, which made me feel like I was really part of the team. We all arrived at camp, and I rode in on the bus with my teacher while some of the other teachers and parents drove cars full of luggage. When we got off the bus, the teachers were heading to a meeting with the camp director and counselors. I stopped for just a second to fill up my water bottle before joining them. That's when it happened. As I'm finishing up, a mom walks right up to me with this serious look. Before I can even greet her, she says, "You can't wear that." At first I thought I misheard her. "Excuse me?" She doubles down. "Young lady, that is so inappropriate for a school setting. You're going to distract my son and all the other boys. You need to change as soon as we get to our cabins." For reference, I was wearing jeans, a black undershirt, and a tank top with thick straps. The undershirt kept everything covered. Nothing revealing, nothing inappropriate. And on top of that, it was over 100 degrees outside. Tank tops were about the most reasonable thing anyone could wear. I let out a small laugh, because I honestly thought this had to be a misunderstanding. We'd both laugh off later. Nope, that chuckle lit a fire under her. "Don't you dare laugh. I'm serious. Who is your teacher? You are so disrespectful. No wonder you're dressed like that. Trying to get the boys' attention, I bet. At that point, I put on my calmest professional smile, the kind you use when you're dealing with a difficult parent. Whose parent are you? I asked. She told me her son's name. He was from another class and had a bit of a reputation as a troublemaker. So I said, Mrs. EM. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm not a student. I'm a teacher. And the camp's dress code allows my students to wear tank tops, so do not ask them to change. That did not calm her down. Now you're lying to me. Where is your teacher? I'm getting you sent home. Right then, another teacher, Mrs. A, walked over. She'd overheard the yelling and, funnily enough, she was also wearing a tank top. Is there something you need, Miss OP? She asked. I kept my voice level. No, I was just introducing myself to Mrs. EM. She didn't know Mrs. T had a student teacher this year. Mrs. A smiled warmly. Oh, Miss OP has been such an asset to all of us this semester. Your son actually had a few science lessons from her this year. She's going to be a great teacher. The mom's face went bright red. She didn't say much after that. Later that day, all the parents came down to the lodge for an orientation about the week ahead. My mentor teacher, Mrs. T, introduced me to the group as part of the teaching team. The parents were welcoming, and some even told me how much their kids loved having me in the classroom. Everyone seemed happy, except that one mom, who just sat there fuming. But the best part of the trip so far? At dinner, her son came running up to me, completely excited, and in front of his mom shouted, Miss OP, can you teach 7th grade next year so you can be one of my teachers? I'm gonna miss you. I don't think I've ever seen a parent look so uncomfortable in my life. That's where this story ends. That's such a funny clash between appearances and reality. It's wild how quick some people are to assume the worst without stopping to think. The part where the kid complimented her right in front of his mom almost feels like perfect timing. And honestly, it's kind of nice knowing the other teachers had her back right away. This next story is about neighbors who started out friendly but quickly crossed boundaries, from demanding dog sleepovers to causing property damage. When my neighbors first moved into the townhouse next to us, everything seemed great. They had kids who were sweet and polite. The parents were quirky but friendly, and it felt like they were just a normal, loving family moving into the community. We'd chat about home improvement, share a beer on occasion, and they even helped with things like installing a screen door. At the start, it really felt like we had lucked out with good neighbors. But after a few months, the red flags started creeping in. The first big one was around Halloween. We could hear constant banging and pounding noises coming from their side of the house. At first, my wife and I figured it was just the kids being rowdy and having fun. But then, out of nowhere, the father called me on the phone. He was crying, actually crying, about how upset he was that they hadn't been invited to a big Halloween party next door. The thing is, the family hosting that party has this open door rule with all the neighbors. Their standing policy is simple. If my garage door is open, you're welcome to come in and join. Everybody knew that. So for this grown man to break down over not being invited, when he absolutely could have just walked in like anyone else, was one of those moments where I started to realize they weren't quite what they seemed. Then things got even weirder. Their kids came up with the idea that our dog should have sleepovers at their house. At first we thought it was kind of cute. They liked walking him now and then, and we didn't see the harm. But after a while, it turned into something more serious. One day, when the kids were excitedly asking again about a doggy sleepover, their mom pulled me aside. She told me in this really stern tone that it was unfair we got to have the dog all week long. I just stood there for a second because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then she went further. She said that since I work shift work and get to spend a lot of time with the dog during the week, it only made sense that her family should get him on weekends, like it was some kind of joint custody arrangement. I didn't even know how to respond to that. It wasn't just awkward, it was intrusive on a whole new level. The final straw came later on. One day we discovered a scratch on one of our cars. It wasn't deep, but it was obvious. We saw one of their kids nearby, and it was pretty clear the scratch had been an accident. We didn't want money, and we weren't looking to escalate things. We just wanted to let the parents know so maybe their kids would be more careful in the future. But when we brought it up, instead of apologizing, they told us to call the police if we had a problem. That was it. No acknowledgement, no responsibility, no willingness to even have a conversation. At that point, my wife and I realized the relationship was done. We stopped trying to be friendly neighbors and kept our distance after that. That's the end of this story. That one really shows how fast a neighborly relationship can unravel. It's wild how they went from friendly beers and conversations to demanding custody of the dog, like it was a kid in a divorce. The part about scratching the car and then telling them to call the cops, instead of just saying sorry, really sealed it. Sometimes keeping your distance ends up being the only option. This next story is about a parent who secretly filmed a coach recovering from surgery and tried to get them removed from the kids' sports program. Not long ago, I had to go through an emergency appendectomy. The surgery itself was rough, but the recovery was even harder. It wasn't just about resting and healing physically. It also forced me to step back from everything that made me feel like myself. I've always been active, always identified with being healthy, moving, running, coaching. Suddenly, I couldn't do any of that, and I felt kind of lost. For a while, even when the doctors cleared me to move again, I couldn't shake the anxiety. I kept thinking, you're slower than you used to be. Your technique isn't as sharp. You don't fit in anymore. It messed with my head. I avoided public places to train because I didn't want anyone to watch me struggle. But eventually, I knew I had to face it. The only way to get back into shape was to actually start training again. So I began running again at the local track. At first it was just slow laps. Gradually I added a little more speed, then sprints, then some light bodyweight training. Most of the time I zoned out with my headphones on, not paying much attention to anyone else. I told myself no one cared what I was doing. My friends reassured me too. They said all the worries were in my head. Turns out they weren't. Someone was watching me. And worse, they were judging me. It all came crashing down on a Friday. I was setting up for practice at the kids program where I coach when the head coach pulled me aside. He said a parent had a complaint and wanted to meet. The parent was someone I didn't know well. Let's just call her Karen. At first I figured it was something typical, like wanting her kid to play a certain position or start more games. But when I walked into the office, Karen had something else entirely. She had a video of me running. She had filmed it from the stands while her kid was out on the track. She sat there, showing it to my boss, pointing out how slow I looked and claiming I was out of shape. I can't even describe how horrifying that felt. It's one thing to be insecure in your own head. It's another to see a stranger literally filming your weakest moments to use against you, and then she doubled down. She said her 8-year-old son had lapped me on the track, and if coaches couldn't physically outperform the kids, then what example were we setting? She was insisting the program replace me with a healthy coach. Now my boss knew about my situation. He knew why I'd been gone, why I was still easing back into things. But he kept that private, which I respected. He calmly told her that my abilities weren't her concern, that the staff was fully managed, and that her son wouldn't be impacted. He was professional but firm. Karen wasn't satisfied. She started speculating about how my time off was connected to being out of shape. She even pushed the idea that maybe I should be furloughed until I was fully back to normal. That stung because technically she wasn't wrong. It was because of my health. But it wasn't her business, and it definitely wasn't her place to say I didn't belong. At one point, I stepped in. I thought maybe if I just explained, maybe if I was honest, she'd realize how cruel she was being. So I told her I'd had surgery, that I was recovering. I thought it might shut her down, but she just turned back to my boss and said, all the more reason to bring in someone else in the meantime. That was the moment I knew nothing I said would matter. But thankfully, my boss didn't budge. He told her again, firmly, that the staff's health and training were not up for parental oversight. He also told her he was the owner and founder of the program, so there was no higher authority to take her complaints to. Karen wasn't happy. She threatened to stop recommending the program to other parents, which honestly was a pretty empty threat. My boss just let her talk until she ran out of steam. Then, right as she was about to leave, he stopped her. He told her point blank that if she was ever caught surveilling or harassing staff again, she would be permanently banned from all games, practices, and team events. No warnings, no exceptions. That part, hearing him back me up like that, was incredibly reassuring. I can't say it erased the sting of seeing that video, or the embarrassment of knowing someone had been watching me struggle, but at least I knew the rest of the staff had my back. So we left that office, went out to the field, and ran a great practice with the kids. Karen stormed off, still fussing, but at the end of the day, she was the one left in the dust. That's where this story ends. That must have been surreal, knowing a parent was secretly filming them just to complain. What really stands out, though, is how solid the boss was. Calm, firm, and protective. It's good when leadership makes it clear that boundaries matter, and staff won't be thrown under the bus. Honestly, Karen just ended up making herself look ridiculous. Anyways, that's everything for today's batch of stories. Hopefully this was a chill listen, whether you followed along or just let it run while doing your own thing. But before you go, if you enjoyed this video, a quick like and subscribe really helps out. And as always, thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you in the next one.